Chapter 104. Dong. With a muffled sound, the basketball in Evan Turner's hand was forcibly stabbed down by Jiang Hai's right hand. When the basketball fell to the ground, Evan Turner also fell to the ground again. His legs went soft, and he sat on the floor. There was no other way. Jiang Hai's strength just now was too great. Attack, attack, attack. After Jiang Hai landed on the ground, he didn't give anyone a chance. He grabbed the basketball and gave it to Smart. At the same time, he rushed to the front court while shouting, "So strong." Looking at Jiang Hai's back, Evan Turner whispered. He underestimated Jiang Hai. He did not expect this guy's speed to be so fast and jump so high. Just now, when there was physical contact, this guy's jump should be more than 1 meter. Under such circumstances, his strength is still so great. Where did this monster come from? Looking at Jiang Hai, who had rushed to his half of the court, Evan Turner gritted his teeth and muttered. However, he was still very professional. He gritted his teeth and chased after Jiang Hai. But at this time, Jiang Hai's speed was at full speed. After Marcus Smart took the basketball, he immediately broke into the opponent's half of the court. However, Avery and Bradley blocked his path. Seeing that he had no chance, and seeing Jiang Hai rushing behind him, Marcus Smart threw the ball to Jiang Hai. Originally, according to his idea, Jiang Hai would stop at this time and shoot a three-pointer. Just now, he saw Jiang Hai's shooting ability. In his opinion, it was very trustworthy. Or Jiang Hai could break in and shoot 2 points. After all, Evan Turner had not caught up yet. However, he found that Jiang Hai was destined to take an unusual path. About half a meter away from the three-point line, Jiang Hai received the basketball. The moment he received the ball, he did not slow down. Instead, he took the ball directly and rushed toward the inside of the three-point line. After a big stride, he had stepped into a position about 20 centimeters away from the three-point line. It's over. This guy treats basketball as football. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, John on the sidelines couldn't help but say with a smile. The others on the sidelines were also stunned for a moment, then sighed, especially Marcus Smart. It seemed that his fast attack was going to be Jiang Hai's mistake, but would Jiang Hai really make a mistake? At least, he didn't think so. After the first step, he took another big step and stepped straight into the 3-second zone. Just as everyone was surprised, Jiang Hai soared into the air at this time. He jumped high and far. Before any of the players could react, Jiang Hai had already flown to the side of the basket as if he had grown a pair of wings. He exerted force with both hands and buckled down. Clang! Only a loud noise was heard. Then they saw Jiang Hai hanging high above the basket, and the basketball bounced under the basket. This was the first time that Jiang Hai sprinted from the backcourt and jumped for a slam dunk. There was only one word to describe it: cool. Yahoo! With a whistle, Jiang Hai jumped down from the basket and high-fived Marcus Smart, who was still in a sluggish state. Then he ran back to defend. As for the others, they were a little confused. While these people were in a daze, Brad Stevens' eyes lit up on the sidelines. He knew that Jiang Hai's physical fitness was good, but he didn't expect it to be so good. 3 steps from the three-point line? This kind of thing happened during a fast attack. It was really too surprising. At least, it took some time for him to react. We must sign him, no matter what the cost. Imagine if Jiang Hai did this in the game. Although the impact on the game was only 2 points on the surface, the impact on the morale was imaginable. If this monster was released, no one knew how big of an impact it would have on a basketball world. However, when he thought about how he was the one who released this monster, he felt his heart begin to twitch for no reason. This monster! At this time, Evan Turner, who saw the scene behind Jiang Hai, had no other choice but to smile bitterly and helplessly. For the following ball, except for Avery and Bradley, who was mentally prepared, the others were a little confused. So, the ball naturally didn't hit the target. After Olenek grabbed the rebound, he passed it to Marcus Smart. Smart dribbled the ball across the half of the court and happened to see Jiang Hai slowly running across the half of the court. Thinking about Jiang Hai's explosive dunk, he felt that this ball should also be played by Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai received the ball, and Evan Turner on the opposite side immediately greeted him. His pair of long arms waved in front of Jiang Hai. But this time, he was mainly defending against breakthroughs. He also knew that Jiang Hai's shooting was good, but now Jiang Hai had just crossed the half of the court. In his impression, Jiang Hai was definitely going to break through or dribble the ball up. But unfortunately, if he guessed correctly, then Jiang Hai would not be Jiang Hai. Looking at Evan Turner in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and then jumped directly in front of him. Who the F *CK? Seeing Jiang Hai's unconventional way of playing cards, Evan Turner immediately took a step forward and wanted to defend against Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai had already jumped high at this time. In everyone's surprised eyes, Jiang Hai threw the basketball one step away from the center line. The basketball drew a beautiful arc and plunged into the basket. I told you that within his half of the court, he can hit all the shots, and his accuracy is unusually high. Seeing that everyone was getting more and more stunned, Avery and Bradley shrugged helplessly and said to them. Thinking back to when he first came back, he told his teammates and coach about Jiang Hai. But none of these people believed him at that time. Now, facts speak louder than words, and he didn't need to say anything more. Then, how do we defend against this? Hearing Avery and Bradley's words, Evan Turner couldn't help but hesitate and said to him. Hearing what he said, Avery and Bradley shrugged and then pointed to Brad Stevens on the sidelines. His meaning was very clear. Don't ask me, ask the boss. Seeing his appearance, Evan Turner sighed. It seems that I'm going to suffer today. It turned out that his guess was quite correct. He was indeed going to suffer. Smart attacked again, and Smart seemed to recognize Jiang Hai's point. He passed the ball again, and Jiang Hai didn't let him down. He caught the ball from a long distance and easily hit it. After 4 consecutive shots, Evan Turner had to go around and directly prevent Jiang Hai from catching the ball. However, he could prevent Jiang Hai from catching the ball, but he could just go inside the three-point line. With a flash, he rushed inside the three-point line. Smart saw Jiang Hai running and making gestures at the same time. Without saying anything, he directly hung the ball inside the three-point line. After all, this ball was a little far away, so it was hung a little high. However, for Jiang Hai, it didn't matter how high it was because he could get it no matter how high it was. Suddenly, under everyone's gaze, Jiang Hai jumped straight into the air and blocked Marcus Smart's pass at an absolute height. In an instant, his lower abdomen tightened. It felt as if Jiang Hai had stopped in the air. Before Zeller could react, he calmly dunked the ball into the basket. Wow, this is the first time I know that assists are so easy to get. The balls that were given to Jiang Hai were all given out by him. As a point guard, this was the first time Smart realized that it was so easy to be an assistant. If he played a game with Jiang Hai, would it be possible to break Stockton's NBA assist record? Thinking of this, his eyes became brighter and brighter, and Brad Stevens' eyes on the sidelines became even brighter. Sign him. No matter what, we have to sign him. Even if we give him a mid-level contract, we have to sign him. Just sign him for 1 year. Even if we give him the highest salary next year, it doesn't matter. We have to sign him. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was having fun and smiling brightly on the court, Brad Stevens' expression didn't change, but in fact his hands in his pockets were trembling. In a while, sort out the video of this game. I want to use it. Looking at the stunned assistant coach on the sidelines, Stevens whispered. Hearing Stevens' words, the assistant coach was stunned for a moment, then nodded to show that he understood. This training game that followed was almost all for Jiang Hai. By the time Jiang Hai left the court, he had already played a full quarter of the game, 12 minutes. In these 12 minutes, Jiang Hai made a total of 12 of 13 shots, 7 of 7 three-pointers. There was a dunk, but his strength was too great, so he clasped the back of the basket and didn't dunk it in. In addition to this one shot, he made all his other shots. In 12 minutes, he scored 31 points. What's the current NBA record for a quarter? If I remember correctly, it should be Iceman George Gwynn and Mellon Carmelo Anthony with 33 points in a quarter. Now Jiang Hai easily scored 31 points without being the focus of the offense. Does that mean that he can break this record at any time if he wants to? Thinking about it, Brad Stevens was really a little excited. In addition to these 31 points, the other 4 block shots and 3 rebounds didn't seem so important. You take Jiang Hai to Mr. Angie first. I'll sort out the video, and then I'll be there. Thinking of this, Brad Stevens' determination to sign Jiang Hai became stronger and stronger. He didn't wait for the end of the practice and directly pulled Avery and Bradley next to him. Then he handed the matter over to the assistant coach and left with the videographer. They needed to edit this 15-minute training game. As for Jiang Hai, he was taken by Avery to take a shower first. He washed off the sweat on his body, changed back to his original clothes, and went to the building on the other side of the arena. Today's second update was continuously delivered. If he didn't post it, there would be people scolding him. In fact, if he posted it, there would probably be people scolding him. Xiaofei had been writing books for many years and had encountered a lot of readers. It was normal for them to give opinions when they read books. Xiaofei would also give opinions when he read books. Generally speaking, Xiaofei would add comments, of course, when Xiaofei thought about it. However, there were always some people who posted threatening and insulting words. Generally, when he encountered such posts, Xiaofei's way of dealing with them was to not delete them and ignore them. If he deleted them, they would have more to say. What about deleting the post? What about disrespecting the readers? Xiaofei just ignored them. However, the things that these people said were more or less in his book. Although sometimes they were nitpicking, at least it proved that they had read his book. However, there were also some people who posted inexplicable comments. They obviously posted things that weren't in his book. There were also a bunch of replies below, as if they were real. Xiaofei didn't know whether they were paid posters or just trolls. Regarding this, Xiaofei felt very helpless. The people who could see this paragraph were actually people who followed Xiaofei's book. Xiaofei said a few words and complained, and everyone could understand. This book was now in Sanjiang. Although Xiaofei didn't want Sanjiang to be first or second, if everyone felt that this book was okay, please vote for Sanjiang. If it stayed in the last place, no one would be proud, right? Chapter 105. The composition of an NBA team was not inferior to that of a large multinational corporation. It was not much different. In addition to the boss and the board of directors, the responsibilities of the club were also extremely strict. The general manager, the deputy general manager, the scouting department, the finance department, the publicity department, the internal affairs department, the legal department, the marketing department, the human resources department. It could be said that there were hundreds of people in the surrounding departments that were formed around the basketball team. This did not include the surrounding departments, such as the security inside the stadium, the people in charge of the surrounding shops, and the people who managed the small vendors, etc. In addition to these non-basketball people, there were many people related to basketball. The scouting department mentioned earlier was naturally one of them. The scouting department was generally planned under the general manager or the head coach. It depended on who had more say in the team, the manager or the head coach. If it was the Lakers, it would probably be under the general manager. If it was the Spurs, it would definitely be under the head coach. After all, Brad Stevens was still young for the current Celtics, so it was under the general manager, Danny Ainge. As for how many people there were in the scouting department, it was uncertain. However, there would be at least 6 or 7 official scouts, plus their assistants. After all, the people they were in charge of were different. Some of them were in charge of the NCAA in the western United States, the central United States, and the eastern United States. Some were in charge of high schools, some were in charge of low-level leagues, and some were in charge of overseas, Europe, Asia, South America, Australia, etc. The NBA placed a lot of emphasis on scouting. After all, what was the most important thing in this era? It was talent. In addition to the scouts, there were also many nutritionists in the cafeteria. Naturally, there were also many assistant coaches. It was like playing a game. Sometimes, a head coach would even have as many as a dozen assistant coaches. First of all, there had to be a first assistant coach responsible for arranging and practicing the tactics that the head coach had prepared. Next, there was an offensive tactics coach, a defensive tactics coach, and a fitness coach. These were the 3 most basic coaches. Under these coaches, there was also a shooting coach, an offensive coach under the basket, a positioning coach, a defensive drill coach, and so on. The fitness coach was also divided into basic fitness coach, strength coach, assault coach, and so on. In addition, there was also a team doctor. All in all, the NBA club was a huge organization. It was not as simple as what Jiang Hai had seen on TV. With so many people, it was naturally impossible to squeeze together with the players, so they had their own separate office building. Of course, there were also some teams that would work together in order to save space, or if the original training center was really built very large. For example, the Cavaliers Training Center and the Mavericks Training Center. The level of luxury of their training centers was not inferior to their home court. However, the Celtics were a century-old team, and they were not known for their wealth. Therefore, they naturally had to save money. Now, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at another building. Although the two buildings were separated, they were connected by a bridge, so there was no need to walk outside, which was troublesome. Not long after, Jiang Hai was taken by Avery and Bradley to an office. He respectfully knocked on the door. Not long after, Danny Ainge's voice came from inside. The two of them pushed the door open and walked in. As for John and Lewis, they were very perceptive. They went to the parking lot to wait for Jiang Hai. It was better for outsiders like them to not be present when the contract was being discussed. "Sir, I brought Jiang Hai here." Walking into the office, Avery and Bradley spoke to the old man sitting behind the desk. Jiang Hai nodded at him. It was a greeting. "Well, Avery, you go back to training first. I'm looking forward to your performance tonight." Looking at the two people who walked in, Danny Ainge chuckled and said to Avery and Bradley. Hearing his words, Bradley did not say much. Instead, he turned and left. Before he left, he patted Jiang Hai on the shoulder. Jiang Hai could only pout. He probably knew what these people were going to say, but he was really not interested in becoming a professional player. The main reason he played basketball was to have fun, not to make money. Whether it was for money, for a leisurely life, or for his own condition, staying in the manor was the best choice. Don't forget, Jiang Hai was still counting on his own real dragon spirit to level up. But since he was already here, he might as well listen to what they had to say. Then Jiang Hai sat on the sofa opposite him under his signal. "Since you're here, Mr. Jiang Hai, I think we'll get straight to the point. I think our team needs you. This is a short contract for 10 days. If there are no problems, I think you can sign him. This is an opportunity. If we're satisfied with your performance in 10 days, you'll get a guaranteed contract until the end of the season." Seeing Jiang Hai sit down, Danny Ainge obviously did not have the leisure and time to talk to a little kid like Jiang Hai. Hearing Danny Ainge's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. "Sorry, you just said a short contract for 10 days? Although Jiang Hai did not plan to be a professional player, what the hell was a short contract for 10 days? He had such a strong performance, and he was only going to give him a short contract for 10 days? To use a phrase often seen in domestic NBA forums, Jiang Hai felt insulted. "Yes, you're right. Yes, I think you know your situation better than us. You are not a registered player in the Players' Union, so we need to help you register. Secondly, you have not received formal training, and you are already 27 years old. You don't have much potential to speak of, but since you can sit in front of me, that means you have proven yourself with your strength. You can stay. I am willing to believe in Brad, so we are willing to give you this opportunity." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Danny Ainge said without changing his expression, "Ahem, maybe Bradley did not make things clear to you. First, I'm used to being lazy. I came today just to test the limits of my body, so I have no intention of joining you. Second, even if I wanted to join, I would not sign a short contract for 10 days. Don't worry, let me finish. I'm not an Asian teenager with dreams. Living for basketball, dying for basketball, fighting for basketball for a lifetime, and so on. That is not my original intention. I am a manor owner. My manor is in the suburbs of Boston, in Winthrop. It is a huge manor that gathers a ranch, a fishing farm, and a winery." Looking at Danny Ainge in front of him, Jiang Hai said indifferently, "I just spent $280 million to buy this manor this year. I'm not saying this to show that I am rich. I know that compared to some famous stars or team owners, $280 million is not a big deal. But I just want to tell you that I am not short of money. So I think our conversation about the contract can end here." Clearing his throat, Jiang Hai looked at Danny Ainge and said very seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Danny Ainge was also stunned. This was the first time he had seen such an amazing rookie. What was this guy thinking? Although I feel sorry, our conversation may have to end here. But Danny Ainge was not a little guy who had just entered society. Pretending to be tough with him. Could you be tougher than him? Well, he thought Jiang Hai was pretending. But Jiang Hai did not say anything about this. He just stood up, shook hands with him, and left his office. Although he was in a bad mood after coming out, overall, Jiang Hai was still quite happy today. At least he knew where his limits were. After coming out of Danny Ainge's office, he did not go back to Avery and Bradley or Brad Stevens to talk about this. Instead, he went directly to the parking lot downstairs. There, the Turner brothers had been waiting for a long time. "Hey bro, how is it? Did they sign you?" As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, John immediately asked Jiang Hai. "No." Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai didn't elaborate. It was quite shameful to talk about it. He was a billionaire, but someone threw a 10-day contract in his face. He really couldn't afford to lose this face. That's a pity. But bro, with your physical fitness, it would be even more of a pity if you signed. With your physical fitness, you should play rugby. Looking at Jiang Hai, John immediately said, "Well, it seems that his true love is rugby. Well, let's go back." He opened the door of his F-650 and sat in the driver's seat. Then, under the envious eyes of John and Lewis, he stepped on the accelerator and the car sped toward the exit of the parking lot. "That's the car a man should drive." Looking at Jiang Hai's back, Lewis muttered in a low voice, "Well, bro, with your salary, you can forget about it in your life." Hearing Lewis's sigh, John couldn't help but pour cold water on him, and then got into the passenger seat of Lewis's car with a smile. Hearing his brother's words, Lewis could not help but smack his lips. "Yes, with my current salary, I can forget about it." He lowered his head helplessly, got into the car, then stepped on the accelerator and sped toward the exit. Just as Jiang Hai and others left, in the office building, Brad Stevens took a laptop and walked into Danny Ainge's office excitedly. But when he found that the office was empty, he couldn't help but be stunned. "Danny, where is Jiang?" Looking at Danny Ainge in front of him, Brad Stevens asked with some surprise. "Although I don't know the strength of the person you and Avery like, his character is really not suitable to be a player. When I put the contract in front of him, he was not satisfied and left directly." Shrugging, Danny Ainge said with a smile, "Oh, who the hell? You should have kept him. He is the new god of basketball, my god." Hearing Danny Ainge's words, even Brad couldn't help but swear. He threw down the laptop in his hand and left in a hurry. "Is it necessary?" Seeing Brad's gaffe, Danny Ainge couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he laughed at himself. The new god of basketball? He didn't think that the new god of basketball would look like a Huaxia. Then he saw Brad put down the laptop, and there seemed to be a video on it. Out of curiosity, Danny Ainge clicked on the play button. Chapter 106. "Hey boss, how was it? Did they sign you?" Driving back to his manor, Jiang Hai got out of the car and saw Robinsi and the others coming from the warehouse in the distance. It seemed that they had just cleared the snow. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Robinsi asked with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. "They gave me a short 10-day contract. I'm not crazy, I'll sign that." Hearing what Robinsi said, Jiang Hai said angrily. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robinsi and the others also laughed. Jiang Hai really didn't need to go. "By the way, boss, AI Dahua is looking for you." After chatting for a while, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. As for Lewis and John, they also had to go home. Their female companions were still waiting for them at home. But just as Jiang Hai was about to leave, Robinsi suddenly said to Jiang Hai. Not long after Jiang Hai left, Edward Anderson came over. He didn't say anything and only said that he would call him when Jiang Hai came back. "Okay, ask him to come to my house." Hearing Robinsi's words, Jiang Hai nodded. In fact, even if Edward Anderson didn't say it, Jiang Hai probably knew why he came to find him. It was nothing more than two things: fishing and fish farming. To be honest, Edward Anderson's position in this manner was the most awkward, because others had their own things to do, but he had nothing to do after patrolling the fishing ground every day. This made the old fisherman feel that he took Jiang Hai's money but did nothing. He felt uneasy and didn't want to do anything. Therefore, he always wanted to find something for himself to do. He had to admit that sometimes people were very strange. For some people, he was happy to be paid all day long and not do anything. For example, Jiang Hai in the past. However, some people, such as Edward Anderson, had to do something once they were paid. Otherwise, they would feel uncomfortable all over. Less than 10 minutes after Jiang Hai returned to his room, Edward Anderson, who smelled of the sea, walked in from outside. "Hey, boss, I heard you went to the Celtics to be a player. How's it going?" As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson, who had changed his shoes outside, said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai helplessly threw a beer at him and said in a bad mood, "Don't mention it. Have a seat. What do you want?" "It's like this, boss. I want to ask if you have any plans to raise fish this year." After receiving the beer that Jiang Hai threw over, Ai Dehua didn't rush to open it. Instead, he put the beer on the table and asked Jiang Hai somewhat awkwardly, "Well, I can't say that I don't have any plans, but it depends on the funds." Thinking about the money left in his bank account, Jiang Hai rubbed his temples helplessly. When could he say that money was just a string of numbers? It's already January. If you want to raise fish this year, you have to speed it up. Of course, if you don't want to raise fish now, you can still get some income from the fish farm. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also sighed. He knew that Jiang Hai had invested more money in the ranch, which was more profitable, so the plan for the fish farm would naturally be delayed. However, now that he heard Jiang Hai's words, he also felt a little helpless. Actually, no one will go against the Green Franklin, right? But I remember hearing you say that if we raise fish in the fish farm, it will cost at least tens of millions of dollars. But with me, apart from the tax that needs to be paid in April, I can only use about $10 million. This money is not enough. After hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shrug helplessly. For him, it was great to be able to make a lot of money, but the problem now was that he didn't have enough money. Jiang Hai didn't have the strength to manage bank loans and so on. He didn't want to owe anyone money, even if it was the government. Actually, if we raise fish, we don't have to raise so many at the beginning. The tens of millions I mentioned is the price of raising fish in saturated conditions. If we are not saturated, it won't be too troublesome. And if you have some shortage of money, we can make up for it with the sea we have now. Edward Anderson immediately said when he saw that Jiang Hai wanted to raise fish. "What do you mean?" Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai looked at him with some surprise. The most expensive cost of raising fish, in addition to the money for the fry, is to build a natural environment and food chain suitable for their growth. But in the past few months, I have been checking the situation of our fish farm. I found that the original food chain in our fish farm is quite stable. We only need to plant more seaweed, and then introduce some Arctic shrimp, crabs, cuttlefish, and octopus, and it will be enough to raise millions of cod fry. Ai Dahua said immediately when he saw Jiang Hai asking him. It takes at least 5 to 7 years for a cod fry to grow into an adult, which is to say, to reach the state of sexual maturity. If it was in the South, it would only take 3 to 4 years, but this is the North, so there is no other way. But if it only reaches the state where it can be sold for money, raising it for a year is about the same. The size of a yearling cod, if it is adequately nourished and there are no natural predators, is not a problem for it to grow to about 20 centimeters, and such a cod is about a pound. Based on the current price of fish, a pound of cod was about 2 yuan. With a few million fish, the annual income would be close to 10 million yuan. There is no need to think about making money, but they would not lose too much. Most importantly, this was only the first year. Because the construction of the food chain had cost too much, in the second year, just the cost of labor and fish hatchlings would be enough to make a profit. If the heavens opened their eyes, they would be able to turn a profit after 3 years of peace. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai can't help but smack his lips. If there was no profit from the ranch, Jiang Hai might have listened to Edward Anderson and raised cod. After all, this kind of fish has a large sales volume. As long as it is raised, there is no need to worry about sales. Most importantly, this fish is easy to raise, has a high survival rate, and is not easy to die. It is the best choice to raise a large number of fish. But now, after hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai does not want to raise this kind of fish because it is too cheap. Whether it was raising fish or cattle, Jiang Hai wasn't worried about the quality of these animals because he had the support of his blood. Although he was always bleeding, this made him somewhat speechless. He hoped that, after leveling up, he would be able to solve this problem. But at least he wasn't helpless. He had a way to kill them, so this gave him the idea that he could raise more dangerous fish. Cod was a safe species, so he didn't like it because it was too cheap. Can we raise some more expensive fish, such as tuna, Atlantic salmon, rainbow trout, grouper, and so on? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai recognized that these are the only more expensive edible fish, so he asked Edward, "This can't be tuna. This tuna can't be farmed. This thing runs around for its whole life and will die if it is trapped in one place. Atlantic salmon can be farmed, but this kind of fish is a migratory fish. It needs to grow in fresh water for the first 4 years. If we only buy a 4-year-old half cub, the cost will be very high because a 4-year-old Atlantic salmon is actually very valuable. Rainbow trout and Atlantic salmon are the same. We only have the sea, and there are no fresh rivers or lakes. This kind of migratory fish is not very easy to farm. Finally, grouper can be farmed, but the price of this thing is not high, about the same as cod." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, AI Dahua analyzed with Jiang Hai. Everyone in the world knew that tuna was expensive, but no one in the world had raised this thing because this thing, like some sharks, needed to constantly swim in order to get oxygen. And most importantly, this kind of fish lived in groups. In other words, to raise tuna, one must first have a large enough body of water to let these fish swim continuously in order to get oxygen. But the oxygen in this body of water was fixed, and if one raised too much, they would suffocate to death. It was also impossible to get oxygen in the sea. If one raised too little, there would not be enough money to raise the fish, so far, no one had raised this thing at all. It was said that Japan was now raising it, but no one knew the progress of raising it. As for salmon and rainbow trout, everyone knew that this kind of fish was very valuable, especially wild ones, but the problem was in front of them. How to raise migratory fish. Directly raising them in the sea, the cost was too high. If they didn't raise them, where could they find a river to raise small fish? These were all problems. Finally, the grouper, this thing's range was too wide. There were expensive ones, and there were also cheap ones. The cheap ones were like gold grouper, green grouper, gentian grouper, pearl gentian, and so on. They were all very cheap, and even the price was not much different from cod. The expensive ones were like tiger grouper, eastern star grouper, and these were all expensive. However, eastern star grouper could only be raised in the southern Indian Ocean. This was a tropical fish, and the same was true for tiger grouper, a tropical fish. As for the most expensive mouse grouper, it was not a grouper, but a perch family. Its scientific name was humpback perch. Although this kind of fish could also be raised, its survival rate was quite low. Now, many people raise this fish as an ornamental fish. It could be seen how difficult it was to raise this kind of fish, so for Jiang Hai's proposal, Edward Anderson could only smile awkwardly. He had to admit that sometimes his boss was really whimsical. These fish can be raised? Alas, although I don't have any prejudice against codfish, this kind of fish can't be sold at a high price. I think you've seen and eaten the cows in our manor. My original intention was to only raise high-grade animals in our manor. I have a feeling that the animals raised in our manor are destined to be extraordinary. Something like codfish that can't be sold at a high price. Alas, think about it. Is there anything that is easier to raise and can be sold at a high price? After hesitating for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell AI Dahua some things. Of course, he would not say more. He did not want to be targeted by others. Something that is more valuable can be sold at a high price and is considered easy to raise. It seems that there is. Well, let's get to the point. Today's 2 chapters were delivered consecutively. Chapter 107. $40 for spotted shrimp, $30 for tiger striped crab, $100 for king crab, $100 for geoduck, $30 for dragon crab, $12 for red crab, $240 for mozzarella, $40 for Atlantic salmon, $60 to $200 for bluefin tuna, $45 for yellowfin tuna, $65 for big-eye tuna, $100 for mozzarella tuna. Sitting in the car on the way to Boston, Jiang Hai looked at the form in his hand and muttered in a low voice. Edward Anderson, who was driving, glanced at Jiang Hai with a smile, then shook his head gently. Ever since Jiang Hai wanted to raise expensive seafood, he had been studying these things like a demon. He first looked up some information on the internet, then went to the local seafood market to ask about it. Of course, he also asked about Chinese restaurants. What he was muttering now was the data he had researched over the past few days. Of course, the unit was kilograms. In the United States, there was no such thing as kilograms. If it was converted to pounds, Jiang Hai was too lazy to do so. Aquatic products, especially marine products, naturally had different prices depending on location and size. He was talking about the normal average price, not the price of the premium quality. No matter what it was, as long as it was premium quality, the price would be unusually high. Take codfish, which Jiang Hai thought was worthless, as an example. As long as the codfish was more than 1 meter long, it would sell for thousands of dollars a day. If it was more than 5 meters, it would sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Normally, the codfish that could be sold were only 30 centimeters long, which was a little more than a caddy. 2 codfish added together would not even weigh 5 kilograms. That was the difference. As for the smaller ones, the ultra-low temperature ones could only be sold for 80 cents a pound, while the cold ones could be sold for $1.75 a pound. Jiang Hai had also heard of the term coal for the first time. There were 2 ways to preserve fish. One was to freeze the fish completely at a temperature of -60 degrees Celsius. Although this method would not spoil and was suitable for long-distance transportation, at the same time, it would also destroy the original taste of the fish. Generally speaking, other than large-scale fishing boats, very few fishing boats would do this. Of course, some cheaper fish would also do this. As for chilled fish, it was to use a low temperature to slightly freeze the fish. There was a limit to the freezing time. It could only be kept for 12 days, but if it was sold to the fishmonger on the 11th day, the fishmonger would not accept it. Basically, this kind of fish was caught in the morning and sold in the afternoon. Only then would people buy it. This kind of fish was basically expensive. If the price of a fish was not more than $30, fishermen would not be willing to put it in the cold storage. It should be known that the cold storage was just like the freezer layer of a refrigerator, while the cold storage was like an air conditioning room. The electricity it consumed was like diesel on the sea, which was extraordinarily high. Therefore, Jiang Hai had been looking for expensive sea fish in the market these days. So far, the situation was not bad. In fact, if one wanted to raise fish to make money, the best choice was still codfish. Because Jiang Hai's fish farm was next to Winthrop, it might be faster to sail by boat than by car. Here, after catching fish in the morning, they would sell them. They would definitely be chilled, and a pound could be sold for $1.75. Even if it was a pound per fish, according to Edward Anderson's idea, the survival rate of at least 60% after investing 10 million seedlings in the initial stage. That would be 6 million seedlings, $1.75 per fish, which added up to $5 million. Coupled with the income from the fish food, an annual income of $12 million shouldn't be a problem. However, the money invested in the seedlings, the second-year seedlings, the money to build the ecosystem, the money to pay the workers, the diesel for the boat, and so on would be deducted. In total, the investment in the fish farm would be about $30 million. If they were lucky, they would be able to recoup their investment in 3 years and at least be stable in the 4th year. Almost half of the annual income could be earned. Of course, this half of the income would be taxed. But at least before they recouped their investment, they didn't have to worry about taxes. This was also one of the benefits of the United States. For these farmers and fishermen, they only collected the money they earned, and not the money they earned back. According to Edward Anderson's calculations, Jiang Hai still had the money to invest. After all, the money didn't need to be invested all at once. Secondly, AI Dahua had also recently investigated the underwater situation of Jianghai's fish farm. He found that there were definitely a lot of fish under the water. After 10 years of recuperation, Jianghai's underwater ecosystem was extremely perfect. The number of fish was considerable. Even though it was winter, there were still a lot of fish under the water. According to AI Dahua's preliminary estimate, there were about $10 million worth of fish in the water. Of course, this was under the condition that they were all fished out. With $10 million, not to mention supporting the income of the fish farm for the first year, it was enough for Jianghai to even pay for all the buildings. According to Edward Anderson, there was nothing wrong with doing this, but Jianghai was a little unwilling to accept it. He had always thought that since he was also raising fish and he had to cheat, why couldn't he raise some shiny fish? That was why he went to the market and Huaxia restaurant to inquire about the situation. Of course, in addition to these things, there were also some very valuable things, but Jianghai didn't think of raising them, at least not now. The most famous of them were sea cucumbers and abalones. It was because these two things didn't have much of a market in the United States. Although the market in China was just right, just like the fishermen in the Atlantic region, they knew that the price of the same thing would double if they were to send it to Huaxia. This was a problem. Some of the top goods could be transported by air, but what about the comprehensive trade? All of them by air? That was bullsh *T. After being frozen at ultra-low temperatures and then thawed, the taste would be different, and they wouldn't be able to be sold at a high price at all. As for the frozen ones, they could only be kept fresh for 12 days. They would be caught on the first day and delivered on the second day. If they went by sea, they could cross the Atlantic Ocean, cross the Indian Ocean, reach the Pacific Ocean, turn a corner, and reach Huaxia without encountering any trouble. 12 days was enough for them. Therefore, although Jianghai had the ambition to raise a large number of high-quality fish, everything had to be done slowly. At the very least, he had to prove that he could raise such good things and determine the market before deciding whether to raise them or not. But no matter what he decided to raise, he was determined to raise fry. It was just that the quantity was a problem. At the same time, since he had decided to raise fish, no matter what kind of fish he raised, he had to prepare to start building an ecological circle. So today, Edward Anderson took Jianghai to Boston. They were going to raise fish. Not long after they got off the highway, they saw the Celtics North Shore Garden Arena in the distance. Looking at the arena, Jianghai couldn't help but think of the trial training that day. It was hilarious. A 10-day contract. Of course, on the third day after that day, when they lost to the Nets at home and the Wizards away, Bradley and Brad Stevens came to Jianghai's house with a guaranteed annual salary of $98 million. They hoped that Jianghai would agree to join them. But let alone $98 million, even if the annual salary was $8 million. Jianghai might be tempted, but it's a pity he doesn't have that zero. The difference is still huge. What can he do that he can't earn $2 million? Furthermore, he still has to pay half of the taxes to the U.S. government, which is only $1 million. Does he lack this amount of money? What a joke. If he has the time, he can go to the sea and make more than this amount. So, in the end, Jianghai did not agree. The two of them expressed their helplessness, but they said that they will not give up. Jianghai doesn't care if they will give up because it will be New Year's Eve soon. In the United States, there was nothing good about the New Year. It wasn't as interesting as Christmas. The major competitions didn't give off the feeling of being the focus of attention. Only some TV stations would do some New Year's Eve concerts. If Jianghai was in New York, he could go to Times Square to watch the concert and then pick up some girls. Maybe he could even get a kiss at the end of the new year. But obviously, he doesn't have the mood to go. So, he spent New Year's Eve alone at home. With the arrival of January, the coldest time of the year had arrived in the Boston area. After Belle returned, Robbins and the others had to end their vacation in advance and start to get busy. As for John and Louis, after the new year, they returned to the place where they should go. Although Jianghai's manner was very fun, after all, they still had their own things to think about. At the same time, AI Dahua and Jianghai also have something to do. They need to buy water plants. The basic structure of the ecological food chain is that big fish eat small fish, small fish eat shrimps, and shrimps eat water plants. In Boston, unless you raise strange fish, you have to put in the fry at the beginning of spring, which is March. The fry need to eat when they go into the sea. Of course, they can be fed at a fixed location, but they also need to hide to avoid being eaten by big fish. So, when the fry are put in, the ecological environment must be built. Water plants, as the most basic part of the food chain, need to be put in first. When the water plants grow for about a month, you will start to put in shrimp, crab, shell, and so on. After these seedlings grow for another month, you will start to put in the fry. However, because the sea is still cold in March, you need to put in a bigger body when you put in the fry. 2 small larvae will not do. These are all things to pay attention to. In the past, Jiang Hai was not very clear about it. He has to admit that you're never too old to learn. When Jiang Hai was thinking about what to raise in his heart, the car slowly drove into the port in the center of Boston where Jiang Hai had been before. But this time, it went in another direction. Jiang Hai saw a large number of grid boxes from afar. This is the wholesale market of Boston's fry. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 108. Hi, AI Dwa here. This area was not the territory of a fish seedling wholesaler, but almost 90% of Boston's fish seedling wholesalers were concentrated there. AI Dahua had been dealing with ships for most of his life, so he was naturally very familiar with this place. Before he came, he had already called to contact people, so after driving in, he didn't pay attention to the people outside who were waving and asking questions, but he drove straight inside. After about 3 minutes, a black man appeared in front of Jiang Hai's F-750 and waved at AI Dahua with a happy face. AI Dahua turned the steering wheel and stopped in front of him. As the two opened the door and jumped out, AI Dahua and the big man on the other side couldn't help but hug each other, showing a brotherly love. Boss, let me introduce you. This is Iron Bull, Porter, and Eva, my good brother. We went out to sea together on a fishing boat to catch sperm whales. He is the largest private fish seedling wholesaler here. Iron Bull, this is my current boss from the mysterious East, Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang. After hugging the big black man, AI Dahua introduced him to the two with excitement. Hearing AI Dahua's introduction, the big man named Porter and Eva reached out his hand first. Hello, Mr. Jiang. You can call me Iron Bull. After shaking hands with him, Jiang Hai also nodded with a chuckle. Jiang Hai was also looking at this guy. He is more than 9 meters tall, bald, and shiny black skin. Although it is winter now, he is not wearing too much. His huge size makes people feel scared. It is not bad to be called Iron Bull. AI Dahua had already told Jiang Hai about this person's origin on the way here. This black man used to be a crew member with AI Dahua in California, but he was younger than AI Dahua. Later, after the two made money, AI Dahua came back to retire, and he opened a fish seedling company in Boston. Perhaps because they were black, they were discriminated against in the beginning. However, later on, they relied on their strong means and the fact that they were really good seedlings that allowed them to gain a foothold here. After all, in a capitalist society, those rich people were more concerned about whether you could bring them wealth, not the color of your skin. When there was a conflict between racial feelings and U.S. dollars, the U.S. dollars were often more powerful. Although I don't dare to say that my place is the largest in Massachusetts, I definitely have the most complete variety here. AI Dahua has already told me your purpose for coming here. Since you want to choose grass seeds, you need to order the fish first, because different fish eat different bait, and different bait naturally eat different seaweed. After being polite with Jiang Hai, Iron Bull led Jiang Hai and the others into the room behind him. I have a very complete set of fish seedlings here. I have almost every type of fish that can be farmed here. There are a few boxes of Atlantic cod here. Although you don't plan to raise this kind of fish, I still have to say that this kind of fish is actually the easiest turn. Moreover, it's almost guaranteed that you won't lose money. Iron Bull introduced to Jiang Hai as he walked into the grid area behind him. The price of the cod seedlings here was really not expensive. It was about 13 cents per tail. According to the calculation, a mature fish could be sold for $1.75, which was almost a dozen times the profit. After deducting the labor cost and the cost of the bait, one could earn about 90 cents per fish for a year. 1 million fish would be $900,000, and 10 million fish would be $9 million. Raising this kind of fish could indeed make a profit without making a loss. But in Jiang Hai's view, the scope was too small and not suitable for him to develop. This is a herring. It's a type of fish that can be raised with cod, but it doesn't grow big. It's like a gift from Santa Claus. It's a surprise no matter how many there are. After walking past the most cod ponds, they arrived at the bottom ponds. The herring seedlings in the ponds were smaller than the cod. After all, the fish itself did not grow very big. The largest was about 30 centimeters. Unlike cod, which could live for a long time and grow big, this kind of fish was basically a set with cod. When raising cod, they would more or less raise some herring. The economic value of this kind of fish was similar to that of cod. It could be sold for money, or it could be used as rations for cod. Of course, the most important thing was that its sales were large, and there was no need to worry about sales at all. The price of this kind of fish was 8 cents per tail. After all, it could also be used as rations, so it was not expensive. This is the Maine lobster pond, and this is the emperor crab pond. I specially imported them from Asian island countries, but they are not very easy to raise. This is the bamboo shrimp, which came with this kind of crab. Although the taste is good and the price is good, it is also not very easy to raise. This is the oyster pond. I have almost all the oysters in the world here. This is the high prestige oyster, produced in Ireland. This is the king of oysters, the Ghidorah oyster. This is the best oyster. If it grows well, it can be sold for $20 in a Western restaurant. I heard that they will sell it for about $10. These damn Western restaurants. After walking through the cod and herring pond, Jiang Hai saw a crustacean purse net in front of him. The things in the purse net made Jiang Hai's eyes light up. Needless to say, the Maine lobster was a representative species of Maine and the Boston area. Although the local price was not high, Jiang Hai had always wanted to raise them. It was just that he had not dived into the water these days, so Jiang Hai was not sure if his territory was suitable for raising these things. If it was suitable, he would raise a few. Although eating lobster was despised by others in China and was said to be a nouveau riche, Jiang Hai was now a nouveau riche, so he wanted to eat them. In addition to the lobster, he also saw other valuable things that he had investigated, such as the emperor crab. The emperor crab and the emperor crab were not the same kind of crab. The emperor crab actually referred to the Kanshaka stone crab, which belonged to the stone crab family. The emperor crab's scientific name was the giant pseudo-littoral crab, which belonged to the crab family. It was easy to distinguish from its appearance. The emperor crab was a spider crab, a killer crab, the kind with particularly long legs. It looked more like a spider than a crab. The emperor crab, on the other hand, was an enlarged crab. It was very big, quite big. People in Europe and America would not eat the killer crab, but they liked the emperor crab very much. However, the price of this guy was also very good. The average price of 1 kilogram was about $100, and a grown emperor crab weighed at least 10 kilograms. In other words, one crab could be sold for more than $1,000, and this was when it was bought raw. If it was cooked in a Western restaurant, it would be even more expensive, and this kind of crab was so expensive that it could be ignored. Many seafood restaurants did not dare to buy it. They were afraid that it would die after being raised in the restaurant, or that no one would order it. After all, one crab could cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the current situation in China, without people with 2 mouths to feed, there were not many people who could afford to eat it. Although the bamboo shrimp was not as expensive as the spotted shrimp, if it was raised, 1 kilogram could be sold for about $20. Among the seafood, it was a pretty good price. Of course, the most expensive clam was the geoduck clam, which was also available here. As for the oysters, which were very popular in Europe and America, Jiang Hai was a little confused. This was because he also ate oysters in China. However, oysters should be very cheap. The smaller restaurants in China, or in the night market, sold oysters for $1, $2 each. He really could not understand why an oyster could be sold for $20. Was it robbery? In addition to these things, there were many other kinds of shellfish here. These were also the fish food that Jiang Hai wanted to buy in the future. There were all kinds of clams, and clams. Well, it was not called that in the United States. But the things here were the same. Along the way, Jiang Hai also looked at the things here. The things here were indeed very complete, and there were even abalones. However, for things like abalones, ordinary small abalones were not worth much. They were sold in the domestic seafood market for a few dozen dollars per kilogram. The bigger ones were sold in some seaside cities for more than $10 per abalone. Those truly precious abalones were top-notch. The so-called top-notch did not refer to how many heads the abalones had, but how many abalones there were in a caddy. The so-called two-headed abalones meant that 2 abalones weighed a caddy. The price of such abalones could be imagined. The 3-headed abalones were much cheaper than the 2-headed abalones. The abalones that cost dozens of yuan per caddy were estimated to have more than 10 heads. The abalones that cost more than 10 yuan per caddy were estimated to have 7 or 8 heads. Such abalones were not worth much. After walking past these valuable shellfish, they arrived in front of the fish grid. But obviously, the fish here were much better than cod and herring. Iron Bull also stopped here and introduced them to Jiang Hai. This fish is much better in the south because it is too cold here. This is a 3-year-old fish. Nominally, it can be directly thrown into the sea, but in fact, it still needs to be raised for a period of time. I heard from AI Dahua that there is no fresh water source in our country, so this fish is not easy to raise. If you want to raise them directly, I recommend these 3 kinds of fish: grouper, giant grouper, and American redfish. Iron Bull looked at Jiang Hai and said seriously. In fact, there were many types of grouper, but if it was just called grouper, it would be tiger grouper because the tiger grouper was the real grouper. The giant grouper was also called dragon grouper in China, and its price was almost the same as grouper, but its size was much larger. Finally, the American redfish was also a fish that Jiang Hai cared about after all. So, basically, it needs to be raised for 2 years to sell. The price is about the same, about $30 per kilogram. But the survival rate of this fish is very low. Not only does nature eliminate some of them, but they also kill each other. They need to eat constantly, and the cost is also very high. The survival rate of the fry is less than 40%. Of course, I'm talking about wild breeding. If it is in a cage, it will be relatively higher. Looking at Jiang Hai, Iron Bull slowly introduced. Looking at the grid, he pointed at Jiang Hai hesitated. Today's first update, 2 consecutive updates. Sure enough, after returning to the main plot, the book review section was much calmer. Happy, huh? Chapter 109. Logically speaking, it was the most profitable way to raise a fish. A young fish cost $1.15. After 2 years, the cost of a fish was about $50. If it grew to 15 kilograms, it would cost $30 per kilogram, which would be $450 per fish. It seemed like a 9-fold increase, but one fish could earn $400. 100 fish was $40,000, and 1,000,000 fish was $400 million. But to raise 1,000,000 fish, based on the survival rate, one would have to buy 3 million fish seedlings. The cost of a seedling was $50, so in total, it would be $150 million. Someone said that it was still very profitable. What if it was $250 million? But it had to be understood that there might be natural or man-made disasters. For example, what if there was a tsunami? Boston was so prone to typhoons. If there was a tsunami, an earthquake, or an oil pipeline in the Pacific Ocean that happened to blow up and hit Jiang Hai's fish farm, the American government would compensate a part of it, but that was only a part. In the end, Jiang Hai would still lose everything. This was also why most fishermen in North America were willing to raise cod and herring, even though they knew that raising these expensive fish could make money. At least those things were guaranteed. Even if they were to fail this year, there would still be subsidies from the American government, so they would not lose too much. Therefore, people who were willing to take the risk to raise these kinds of fish were also rare in the United States. Basically, if they wanted to raise these kinds of fish, they would only raise them in a small area. No one was willing to raise them in a large area. As for the rest of the bream, I won't recommend them to you because these fish are solitary and it's not easy for you to catch them. Finally, This is the American redfish. This fish has just become popular in recent years, and I heard that it's very popular in China. The price per kilogram of adult fish is about $12, but the price for juvenile fish is 20 cents, which is about the same as codfish, but much more expensive than codfish. It's also easier to raise and grows faster. The biggest fish can grow up to 3 kilograms in a year, and the smallest fish can grow up to more than 1 kilogram. The only troublesome thing is that they eat a lot and are prone to diseases, so they have a high demand for seawater. After introducing the grouper and anchovy, Iron Bull focused on introducing this kind of fish to Shanghai. This kind of fish was also farmed in China. Therefore, Shanghai had some understanding of this fish. Its appearance was similar to yellow croakers, and its taste was similar. After all, they were the same genus, the grouper family. They were considered distant relatives. In the United States and Mexico, this kind of fish was the favorite fish of sea fishermen. It tasted good and was not too fishy, but it was rich in nutrients. It was a very good fish. Recently, this kind of fish was popular in China. Therefore, in the United States, this kind of fish did not have to worry about sales. Most importantly, this kind of fish was easier to raise, and the seedlings were cheap. If there was no problem with the water in the fish farm and they did not get sick, the cost of raising a fish was about $2. 1 kilogram was $12. According to raising it for a year, an average of 2 kilograms will be $24. One fish could earn $22. 1 million fish would be $22 million. The survival rate was much higher than the grouper. This kind of fish liked to eat its own kind. This kind of fish did not have such a habit. As long as there was enough food, there would not be a big problem. So when Shanghai heard this, he was also a little biased towards this kind of fish. Can you raise it together? But it was just a suggestion. Shanghai hesitated for a moment and asked him. Hearing Shanghai's words, Iron Bull couldn't help but be stunned. Raise it together? Boss, have you really decided? Getting in the car, AI Dawa looked at Shanghai and couldn't help but ask hesitantly. Yes, it's decided so happily. Hearing AI Dawa's words, Shanghai also smiled and said to him, Well, you're the boss. I've never raised a fish like this before. With a helpless sigh, AI Dahua said inexplicably, because in the end, Shanghai still decided to raise them together. He wanted to raise 3 million American redfish, 200,000 grouper, and 200,000 giant grouper, and finally add 50,000 salmon. In addition to these things, he also raised other things, such as king crab. This kind of seedling is sold by the ton, $500,000 per ton. Well, Shanghai bought a ton of them, $300,000 per ton. Maine lobster is the cheapest, $20,000 per ton. Shanghai bought 10 tons at one time and prepared to throw them into his ocean together with Haiyu. Fortunately, his fishery was big enough. Otherwise, these things alone would be enough to make the fishery a mess. Shanghai didn't want to waste any more time. Instead, he bought 10 tons of them. Just the money for these seedlings added up to a very considerable income. The American king snapper was 20 cents per fish, so 3 million fish would be $600,000. The grouper was $1 per fish, so a total of 200,000 fish would be $200,000. The anaconda was $1 per fish, so a total of $230,000 would be $200,000. The anaconda was 15 cents per fish, so a total of $230,000 would be $230,000. The king crab was $5 per fish, so 50,000 fish would be $250,000 per fish. Adding the king crabs, $500,000, the spotted shrimps, $300,000, and the Maine lobsters, $200,000. With just a wave of Shanghai's hand, he spent $28 million on these seedlings alone. Someone said, didn't they say to build an ecological environment first, and then buy fish? Such a large-scale purchase of seedlings. Of course, it is impossible that there is no time to prepare. Originally, according to Iron Bull, Shanghai will give him a deposit first, and then he will prepare the seedlings. However, Shanghai was too lazy to talk nonsense. Since AI Dahua said that this person is trustworthy, Shanghai directly signed the contract, and then Shanghai transferred all the money. Faced with Jiang Hai's tycoon style, Iron Bull was about to go crazy with joy. He had never met such a big customer before. With this deal, apart from the transportation, labor, and the original cost of the seedlings, he can earn at least 300,000 renminbi. This income of 300,000 renminbi is equivalent to several years of selling seedlings. Thinking of this, it would be strange if he was not happy. He immediately patted his chest and promised Jiang Hai that he will bring the best seedlings to Jiang Hai. At the same time, he will give Jiang Hai a ton of lobsters, a ton of bamboo prawns, a ton of top-grade Australian abalone, and 2 tons of Ghidorah oysters for free. According to Jiang Hai's calculation, these things added up to almost 100,000 renminbi. Finally, he will give him 5 tons of Arctic sweet prawns. Jiang Hai has to admit that Jiang Hai is very good at doing business. Just these things made Jiang Hai very happy. If he works harder, Jiang Hai will definitely buy from him in the future. This is because Jiang Hai will not only buy seedlings for a year, he does not plan to cultivate seedlings himself. If he wants to catch a big customer like himself, working hard is the only way out. However, after spending the money, Jiang Hai realized that the real money has not been spent yet. Because they bought too many fish, prawns, and crabs, Jiang Hai's fish farm's original need for food has increased rapidly. With the increase in food, the amount of food, water, and plants also increased rapidly. According to AI Dehua's calculation, the amount of seaweed seeds was also increasing. Originally, he only needed about 100,000 renminbi of seeds, but now it seems that he has to increase it to 300,000 renminbi. Iron Bull was also in charge of contacting the sea bath company, but the matters of the phone call discussion were left to AI Dehua and Jiang Hai. When the person on the other side heard that it was a big deal worth 300,000 renminbi, he immediately drove over without hesitation. After the contract was signed, the balance of the 300,000 renminbi of seaweed seeds was paid. The person on the other side of the line laughed like crazy. He said that he would immediately go back and arrange a plane to plant the seeds. Within 3 days, he would help Jiang Hai finish planting them. In addition to the sea bath company and the seaweed, Jiang Hai also needed to buy expensive fish, prawns, crabs, and other things to eat. In other words, cuttlefish, mullet, and all kinds of shellfish, which lived at the bottom of the marine food chain. According to AI Dehua's calculation, it would cost about 2 million renminbi to buy them. And this was only the first batch, because these guys were just food. When the little guys in the fish farm grew up, they would naturally have to be fed. According to AI Dehua, they could put in some bait and so on, which would save a lot of money. However, after some consideration, Jiang Hai felt that it would be better to let the fish hunt for food on their own. After all, Jiang Hai didn't want to feed the fish when they were in a wild state. However, according to what Jiang Hai said, AI Dehua did some research and found that he needed to put in some fish every 3 months, which was a quarter. The first batch cost 2 million renminbi, and the subsequent batches were about the same. Although the fish were growing up, they were also dying. Therefore, the amount of fish food he put in did not fluctuate too much. Even so, Jiang Hai needed to invest 13 million renminbi in fish food for a year, plus the 3 million renminbi he spent today. It would be 16 million renminbi. This did not include the cost of the boats, the cost of oil, and the tax of the sea farm. If all of these were added together, it would be estimated to be 24 million renminbi. Thinking of this number, Edward Anderson was forced to be serious. According to the standard of 60% of the American redfish, 3 million fish would be 8 million mature fish. If the weather was good and there were no disasters or diseases, it would be 18 million renminbi. If he could only earn 10 renminbi per fish, that would be a loss of 6 million renminbi. In other words, he had to earn more than 15 renminbi per fish to be able to recoup his investment. However, he also had to take into account the tax. Although he would receive subsidies later on to make up for most of the loss, he would still have to pay for it in the early stages. If it was not like what Iron Bull said, where he could earn 20 renminbi per fish when they were in their best condition, he might not be able to recoup his investment even after a year of good weather. Thinking of this, he could not help but shudder. No, I had to find a way to get the boss to recoup some money first. Otherwise, when the time comes, it will be really troublesome. AI Dahua looked at the heartless Jiang Hai beside him and whispered in his heart, "Boss, let's go fishing tomorrow." In the end, as if he had made up his mind about something, Edward Anderson turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai beside him. Hearing this, Jiang Hai could not help but be stunned. Fishing? Okay. Looking at AI Dahua's serious face, Jiang Hai's eyes began to shine. Fishing seems like a good idea. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Recently, I've been looking at the Crown Princess. She seems to be poisoned. F***CK, I'm not that gay. Ahem. Okay, the female lead is indeed quite beautiful. Chapter 110. Boss, you can't always rely on me. If you really want to develop the ocean, then it's time to recruit people. Standing on Jiang Hai's specially installed fishing boat, Philip said to Jiang Hai with a depressed face. His real identity is a cowboy, but he is always called a crew member by Jiang Hai. This is not a good thing because he hates the sea. Well, I know. I'm in a hurry today. I'll go recruit in 2 days. While fixing the fishing net according to Edward Anderson's instructions, Jiang Hai smiled and said to Philip, who was complaining, "Let's hope so," Philip said helplessly as he patted his forehead. Originally, according to Edward Anderson's calculation, Jiang Hai shouldn't spend too much money to buy fish seedlings. After all, he only planned to buy codfish at first. Later, when Jiang Hai said that he wanted to raise valuable fish, he naively thought that he was going to raise American redfish. But who knew that after he went there, Jiang Hai's extravagant character instantly occupied the main position. In addition to raising American redfish, he also raised grouper, longzhu, and 4-year-old salmon. If it's just these, then it's fine, but what the hell is that king crab and spotted shrimp? And lobsters? Thinking of this, Edward Anderson's heart faintly ached. If the fish he raised this time really lost all his money, then Jiang Hai would be in trouble. Fortunately, there were a lot of fish in the original fishery. According to Edward Anderson's research, if all the fish and shrimps in the fishery were caught, it would be about $8 million. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't really let him catch all of them. Maintaining the marine ecosystem didn't just rely on the fish raised by Jiang Hai. However, catching some to subsidize the family was indispensable. At the same time, catching fish like this also left room for new fish seedlings to survive. After all, after 10 years of development, the fish in Jiang Hai's fishery was almost full. If he didn't catch some, when it was time to put in the aquatic plants and fish seedlings, those things wouldn't be enough for the playthings underwater. Therefore, after buying the fish seedlings and aquatic plants yesterday, Jiang Hai went home and prepared for the night. The next morning, AI Dahua took him and Philemon, who was forcibly taken from the cowshed by AI Dahua, out to sea on a fishing boat. AI Dahua was indeed a top fisherman. The fishing boat he assembled wasn't small, and it was very good. Although it wasn't big, it ran fast on the sea and didn't sway. Jiang Hai liked it very much. At the same time, the most important thing was that there were many rooms here, and the decorations inside were very good. It could be foreseen that even if they went out to sea to fish in the future, it wouldn't be too difficult. At this time, although the 3 people on the boat were on the same boat, their moods were different. Jiang Hai was excited because this was the first time he went out to sea to fish. The last time he came to look for fish, it couldn't be counted as fishing. AI Dahua was a little anxious. He was eager to earn back the first sum of money for his boss. As for Philemon, well, he didn't have any other thoughts besides muttering there. Bang! However, just as Philip was happily muttering to himself, there was a sudden explosion. On the calm sea surface, a huge figure suddenly appeared. The sea water instantly collapsed onto the boat, drenching Jiang Hai and Philip. Fortunately, the 2 of them had already changed into waterproof fishermen's clothes. Otherwise, they would have been drenched like a drowned rat. Shark, shark! The explosion here attracted the attention of Jiang Hai and Philemon. In Philemon's eyes, a huge shark directly jumped out of the water, jumped straight to the sea surface, and then fell heavily into the water. Then it swam towards the side of the fishing boat while wagging its tail. This shark seemed to be about 4 meters long. Of course, compared to the fishing boat, which was dozens of meters long, it was still small. But compared to humans, it was already twice as tall. Seeing the shark swimming close to the fishing boat, Philemon couldn't help but frown. For fishermen, having a shark following them wasn't good news, because sharks were also hunting fish. If his fishing boat put a net here, then the shark might eat some of the fish. Of course, it would be fine if it only ate some of the fish. The most frightening thing was that the shark would break through the school of fish. At that time, they wouldn't be able to catch any fish, which would affect the harvest. At the same time, the fishing net might also entangle the shark. If it was an ordinary reef shark, they might not care too much, but such a big shark could easily break the fishing net. One must know that a cheap fishing net would cost tens of thousands of dollars, and the expensive ones would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Therefore, for regular fishermen, sharks, especially large sharks, were not a good thing. Of course, catching sharks in the open sea and getting shark fins was another matter. It's okay. Don't you recognize it? It's the shark-tiger shark that I raised. However, compared to Philemon's surprise, Jianghai was a lot calmer. Lying on the boat's bow and looking at the shark swimming below, Jianghai recognized it at a glance. It was the shark that he raised. He hadn't seen it for a while, and it seemed to have grown up in the sea. The effect of Jianghai's dragon blood wasn't ordinary. It was precisely because of the dragon blood that this shark sensed Jianghai's position as soon as Jianghai entered the sea. It quickly swam over, just like a kitten or a puppy, playing there. Seeing the shark's appearance, Jianghai couldn't help but walk to the boat's bow and pat the shark's head. Seeing Jianghai's action, Philemon was stunned. He had heard of raising dolphins and orcas, but what the hell was raising sharks? One must know that sharks were very stupid. They were cold-blooded and didn't recognize people. They didn't have domesticated DNA stored in their bodies. Therefore, almost no one raised them. Even if someone raised them, it would be impossible to pat their head. Originally, Philemon wanted to remind Jianghai, but when he saw the shark turn over in front of Jianghai, he became confused. F***CK, is this a shark or a dog? Don't you know that you can't feel anything when you turn over? Although it felt strange, even if the shark was stupid, at least it showed that it wasn't hostile to Jianghai. And Jianghai didn't let it turn over for too long and directly turned it back. Go under the sea and drive some fish into our fishing net. Patting the sand tiger shark's head, Jianghai said with a smile. After hearing Jianghai's words, the sand tiger shark shook its head and then drilled into the water, disappearing. Boss, you don't really think that it will help drive the fish away, do you? Obviously, Philemon also heard what Jianghai said to the sand tiger shark. When Jianghai returned to the deck, Philemon couldn't help but laugh. Who knows? Jianghai shrugged. He couldn't really say that he had the ability to communicate with animals. Of course, it was with animals that had absorbed his blood. In this way, the fishing boat sailed for about 5 minutes before AI Dehua's voice came from the cabin. Release the net. Hearing AI Dehua's voice, Philemon immediately controlled the machine and released the fishing net from the back into the water. Fishing nets were used for different purposes, so naturally, they were made of different materials. In terms of usage, fishing nets can be divided into gill net, trawl net, purse seine net, net building net, and net spreading net. Different uses naturally lead to different materials. For example, the trawl net used by Jianghai was made of steel wire, nylon rope, and glass steel wire. Although the weight was reduced because of the addition of fiberglass, this net was still calculated by tons. This was not something that can be handled by human strength. Therefore, it must be controlled by a machine. There were 2 devices to control this machine. One was in the control room, which could be directly controlled from the control room, and the other was on the deck. Although Philip didn't know much about sailing, he was still very familiar with the operation of the net. With his skills, it didn't take long for the net to spread out behind Jianghai's fishing boat. Not long after the net spread out, Jianghai felt that the speed of the fishing boat suddenly decreased a bit. In the gaps of the net, Jianghai could see some fish jumping out of the water. Boss, I have to admit that you have a lot of fish in your fishery. Although the net hadn't been released yet, Philemon could see it clearly. Jiang Hai did have a lot of fish. He originally thought that AI Dehua was just joking when he said that there were tens of millions of fish here. But he didn't expect that this estimate was still conservative. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai also smiled happily. He was lying on the boat's bow, looking at the fish net below. What's caught here weren't fish, but green franklins. After about an hour, Edward Anderson's voice came from the deck again, asking Jiang Hai and Philemon to pull up the net. Philemon didn't say anything and immediately went to operate the machine. As the ship slowed down, the net was gradually lifted out of the water by Philemon. Jiang Hai's net was a large one, and the gap between the net was 15 centimeters. In other words, almost all the fish below 30 centimeters would escape through the gap. But when the net was lifted, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh," because the tightened net in front of him was like a huge ball. The fish were squeezed into the middle of the net, which had a diameter of 4 to 5 meters. Jiang Hai really didn't catch fish, but franklins. I'm here to recommend it. I'll push it to the shelves next week. Please support and collect it. It's my first time writing a farming story, so I'm very nervous. Chapter 111. 11.5 tons. That's about 30,000 fish. And this is just the fish from the upper level. If we catch more fish from the lower level, there should be more. Looking at the numbers displayed on the hydraulic screen, Philip couldn't help but smile. Then he controlled the robot arm to pull the fishing net into the empty fish pond. But at this time, there was no water in the pond. This was because the fish needed to be sorted. Some of the fish were very valuable, while some weren't. Naturally, their fates were different. After Philip put the 11 tons of fish into the pond, AI Dehua came out of the cockpit and followed Jiang Hai and Philip into the fish pond. Now they needed to sort out the fish, put some valuable fish into the pool next to them, and throw away or kill some inedible things such as water plants, jellyfish, sea snakes, and so on, which they had caught. Then they need to release some things back into the sea, such as turtles, sharks, seals, sea lions, fur seals, dolphins, and so on. These creatures, other than those who were targeted and killed by crazy people, were basically not targeted by ordinary fishing boats. According to Philemon, they wouldn't catch too many strange things in the upper layer of the fish. Sure enough, after the net was opened, in addition to aquatic plants, most of the fish were fish. There were all kinds of fish. The most conspicuous ones were a few huge red fish. These fish had sharp spikes on their bodies, making them look very scary. When AI Dehua and Philip saw these fish, they immediately ran over and grabbed them by the gills before throwing them into the pond. "What kind of fish are these? They look very festive." Jiang Hai then joined them. Holding a fish, Jiang Hai asked Philip. He was indeed very curious. "This is the vermilion sebaste, a very valuable fish that can grow up to 1 meter. It originally lived in the Pacific Canada region, but later on, the Newfoundland fishery planted it directly, so we have it here. The price of this fish is very high. Not only can it be eaten, but it can also be raised as an ornamental fish. The one in your hand can be sold for about $2,000. Hearing Philip's introduction, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. A fish can be sold for $2,000? That's a big profit. But he was actually thinking too much. It would take 6 or 7 years for the fish to grow to the size of the one in Jiang Hai's hand. It's possible to raise this kind of fish to make money, but it's difficult to make a lot of money in batches. After knowing that the fish in his hand was so valuable, Jiang Hai became more careful and put the fish back into the pond. After putting the fish in the pond, Jiang Hai caught another red fish and was about to put in the pond, but he was stopped by Philip. This kind of fish is the vermilion sebaste. It's valuable. The one you caught is a sea bass. It's not valuable. This kind of fish is also called Norway cod. It's a little more expensive than cod. It's not worth putting in. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. To be honest, it was really difficult for him to distinguish the difference between these fish. Then Jiang Hai discovered that there were a lot of small red fishes among the fishes that they caught. But this time, he decided to ask Philip about these fishes before doing anything else. This is the golden-eye snapper. It's also a fish from the Pacific Ocean, but someone raised it here. It's probably to reproduce. This fish is also very valuable. The people in Japan like it very much. This is the redfin snapper. It's not valuable. This is the big-eye snapper. It's okay, but just throw it here. We'll sort it later. Jiang Hai asked while picking. Then he found that the fish were really not ordinary. In his opinion, all the fish looked the same, but there were several or even more than a dozen different classifications. And this was just the red ones. If you look at the normal color, it would be even more chaotic. There were sebastes, black-banded sebastes, black-eyed sebastes, filed sebastes. At least, Jiang Hai couldn't tell them apart. Just the above 3 kinds of fish, the price difference was like heaven and earth. The price of the black-banded sebaste was the lowest, about $6 per kilogram, while the black-eyed sebaste could be sold for $11. The difference between the two was $5. If Jiang Hai and the other fishermen didn't distinguish the fish clearly, the fish merchants wouldn't give them a share. They would treat them as black-banded sebastes. At that time, the fisherman, that is, the owner of the fish farm, Jiang Hai, would be the losers. 11.5 tons of fish, excluding kelp and water. There were about 10 tons of fish, nearly 30,000 fish. 30,000 fish seemed to be a lot, but in the hands of these professional fishermen, it was actually quite easy to sort them out. It took a little time to sort out the expensive fish, but it only took 1 or 2 seconds to sort out the less expensive fish. Therefore, about 2 hours later, they threw the useless sea snakes back into the sea and killed the jellyfish directly. In the absence of sea turtles, fur seals, sea lions, and other creatures to be released, AI Dahua and Philip had already finished counting all the fish. This kind of work was a piece of cake for them. Let's take a break and then cast the second net. Seeing that the fish were all ready, and it was still early, Edward Anderson took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, lit 2 by himself, and handed 1 to Philip. Then he sat there and rested. Because they knew that Jiang Hai didn't smoke, they didn't give it to Jiang Hai. In fact, Jiang Hai had smoked a long time ago, probably when he was in junior high school. However, his family conditions didn't allow it, and he found that smoking wasn't addictive after a few years, so he quit. Although his financial conditions allowed it now, he didn't intend to pick it up again. It was good that he didn't smoke. Come, boss, let me introduce you to the fish we caught. Seeing that they were smoking while Jiang Hai, the boss, didn't do anything, Philip came over with a smile and introduced the fish to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is the boss of fishery. If he doesn't know what kind of fish it is, then it would be a bit strange. Speaking of which, he has been interested in these fish for a long time. When he heard Philip's words, he also went to the fish pond. This is codfish, this is herring, and this is sea bass, the greediest fish in the sea, but it's also the easiest to catch. These are the ones I introduced just now: vermilion sebastes, lambreme, black striped sebaste, black-eyed sebastes, red sebastes, golden-eye sebastes, fowlhead sebastes, silver rock bass, brown trout you've seen before. It's a migratory fish. This is Atlantic salmon, just like trout. I guess this fish is about to produce seeds. Philip stood beside the fish pond and introduced more than 10 kinds of fish to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai really couldn't tell them apart, so he could only memorize them. He had to admit that being a fisherman required a lot of experience and vision, especially in a fishery like Jiang Hai's. After all, this fishery hadn't been fished for several years. Because he had never fished before, the fish in the fish farm here was very mixed, unlike those farm fish farms. If one's vision wasn't good enough, they would really pick the worst ones. At this time, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel lucky that he asked AI Dahua for help. I know this fish, lionfish. After introducing all the fishes that looked similar, Jiang Hai saw a few that looked different. These fishes had long spikes on their bodies. He remembered that he knew these fishes. They looked very flowery and had hard spikes on their bodies. He had seen them on TV before. This is sea bream. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip hesitated for a moment and decided to tell Jiang Hai the truth. Almost the same. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. He took a closer look and found that they looked almost the same. Far from it. The scientific name of lionfish is sebaste. It belongs to the Scorpionidae family, just like the scarlet sebace and black sebace over there. The sea bream belongs to the sea bream family. Most importantly, Lionfish is a harmful fish. Because of its toxicity, not many people like to eat it, so the price is much lower. We don't have lionfish here. It's a fish from the Pacific Ocean. We have sea bream here, so the price is very high. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip smiled and said. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly. It seems that his knowledge is really not enough. Okay, that's about it. Let's set the net again, and then we'll sell them. This time, let's set the net deeper. Hearing that Philip had almost finished introducing the fish, Hai Dahua stood up and threw the cigarette, but into the trash can that was already prepared on the side of the ship. Then he returned to the cabin. As for Jiang Hai and Philip, they stayed on the deck and pushed the precious fish into a separate room next to them. The room was specially made to be humid. Inside the room, there was a sink that was specially made to store live seafood. Seafood was best when it was still alive. No matter how fresh it wasn't as delicious as live ones. Naturally, there was no live ones that could be sold at a high price. Of course, things like tuna would die once it left the water. As for the rest, the less valuable ones were pushed into the cold storage. There is also a layer of water here, but with so many fish squeezed together, they would naturally live if they could, and die if they couldn't, as long as they were still fresh when they were sent to the fish merchant. After everything was ready, Edward Anderson's voice was heard from the loudspeaker. Obviously, he had seen the existence of the fish through the sonar. Philip immediately manipulated the crane to put the fishing net into the water, but this time, the rope was longer. The fish they caught just now were from the upper layer, about 5 to 20 meters above the sea level. This time, their net was deeper. They wanted to catch fish between 20 to 30 meters. At this time, they were still on the continental shelf. 30 meters deep meant that they had already dragged the fish to the bottom of the sea. This time, they would catch more fish. The reason why they didn't choose to go this deep was that there were reefs in the area just now, but there weren't any in this area. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 112. Wow, it's much more than I expected. Looking at the constantly changing pressure data on the fishing net, Philip couldn't help but whisper. If the fishing net just now was sold, it could probably be sold for about $50,000. Of course, this trip to the sea, the diesel cost $20,000, plus the loss of the fishing boat, the loss of the fishing net, and so on. Adding it all together, the profit of this trip was only about $10,000. Plus the salary of the crew, there wasn't much left. Of course, this refers to the total income of this much. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai's fishing area had more than just this amount of fish. If other fishermen knew about this, they would probably be overjoyed. Now that they had caught a second net of fish, they would make a pure profit. They would make as much profit as they could get. Now that they had caught a second net of fish, they would earn as much as they could get. The pressure is too much. Do you need to slow down? Looking at the reading on the fishing net getting higher and higher, Philip picked up the walkie-talkie and said to AI Dahua in the cabin. Hearing Philip's words, AI Dahua quickly replied, "No need. Do you think the boss's boat is the same as our boat? Everything on this boat is the best, including the fishing net. Even a normal nylon fishing net can withstand this pressure, let alone ours. It's okay, but you have to pay attention. Call me when the reading reaches 300 feet per square meter." Listening to AI Dahua's words, Philip couldn't help but be stunned. Although he knew that Jiang Hai was willing to spend money, to be honest, he still wanted to be a cowboy, so he didn't go with him when he loaded the boat. Now that he heard his brother-in-law's words, he was relieved. "I'll go to the cabin to get a cup of coffee. Do you want it?" After learning that there was nothing here for the time being, Jiang Hai stood in the cold, then knocked on the window of the console next to him and said to Philip. It was only the beginning of January, the coldest time in Boston. Although Jiang Hai was born in the Northeast and the temperature was much colder than here, he still couldn't withstand the sea breeze. He wasn't like Philip. Perhaps for the convenience of operation, there was a special room at the console with a separate heater and glass that could be used to block the wind. Jiang Hai stood directly in the cold wind. Even with his physical fitness, he still couldn't withstand it. After confirming that there was nothing to worry about for the time being, he decided to go back and make some coffee to drink even though he didn't like to drink coffee. But this thing does have the effect of warming the stomach. "Oh, give me a cup too, thank you, boss." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip chuckled. Then Jiang Hai walked into the cabin. Jiang Hai's fishing boat was just like what he said when it was built. Although it looked like a fishing boat, from the interior decoration, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a yacht. In the beginning, that person took a lot of money from Jiang Hai, and it seemed that he was quite serious. The fishing boat had been sent here for a while, and when it was just sent back, Jiang Hai went on board to take a look, so he was still very clear about the structure of the fishing boat. The entire fishing boat was divided into 2 floors. The first floor was the living area. The driver's cabin was at the front, and behind it was a large living room. The living room was about 30 square meters. There were sofas on both sides, a coffee table in the middle, a bar, a TV, and a refrigerator. The interior was decorated with wood and leather sofas, which made people feel very comfortable. Behind the living room was the living area. There were a total of 8 rooms and a master bedroom. Although it wasn't as luxurious as Jiang Hai's villa, it wasn't too bad. The room had a big bed, carpet, TV, refrigerator, sofa, wardrobe, and so on. There was even a separate bathroom and a separate toilet. Among the other 7 rooms, there were 3 master rooms. Although the decoration inside wasn't as good as the master bedroom, it wasn't too bad. The 3 master rooms also had a separate TV, wardrobe, but they were all one size smaller. The remaining 4 rooms were designed as a double room according to AI Dahua's original request. 2 beds were directly welded to the wall. Then there was a separate toilet, wardrobe, table, chair, and TV in the room. According to Edward Anderson, these 4 rooms were prepared for him and the future crew. The master bedroom was naturally for Jiang Hai to live in, and the guest bedroom was prepared for Jiang Hai's guests. As sailors, they naturally needed a place for sailors to sleep. Jiang Hai wasn't used to AI Dahua's clear hierarchy. He told AI Dahua that they could all be made into guest rooms, but AI Dahua didn't agree. Jiang Hai could only shrug his shoulders. In fact, sometimes it felt good to enjoy privileges. Behind the 8 rooms was the kitchen. This kitchen wasn't much worse than the kitchen in Jiang Hai's villa. It basically had everything, but it was different from the kitchen at home. Everything here couldn't be moved. They were all either on the ground or welded to the wall. After all, this was the sea. Even the Titanic could sink, so a 40-meter-long fishing boat was nothing. Therefore, it was never wrong to be careful. In the lower level of these residences was the part of the fishing boat that truly resembled a fishing boat. The lower level connected to the plate armor was 4 huge warehouses. 2 were cold storage. 1 was a live reservoir for the valuable fish, and 1 was a pure cold storage for frozen fish. The size of these 4 warehouses wasn't small. At least dozens of tons of fish wouldn't be a problem. Walking into the residential area, Jiang Hai went straight to the kitchen and used the coffee machine there to make coffee. He made 3 cups at once. He held 1 cup for himself and then took the other cup to the steering room. He didn't forget that AI Dahua hadn't drunk it yet. Walking into the cockpit, he saw AI Dahua driving the ship while looking at the underwater sonar and the pressure reading of the fishing net on the side of the cockpit. This was not the first time Jiang Hai had entered the cockpit, but he had to admit that he felt a headache every time he came in. These instruments and the like were really troublesome. If he hadn't properly studied them, just looking at these hundreds of buttons would make him feel nauseous. The various instruments, positioning, and broadcast made him feel a headache just by looking at them. "Hey boss, thanks." Hearing the footsteps, AI Dahua looked back and saw Jiang Hai walking in with coffee. He also chuckled, then took his cup and continued to look at the data in front of him. "How's it going?" Jiang Hai certainly didn't understand, but at this time, as the boss, he had to ask and pretend to know. So Jiang Hai thought about it and said to Edward Anderson in front of him, "Not bad. The things in the net now are more than before. Although the sea here is not deep, there are a lot of good things. In 10 minutes, we can set up the net." Pointing to the shadow shown on the sonar and the pressure bar from the net, Edward Anderson said with a smile. But just as he was joking, his face suddenly changed because 2 black bars suddenly floated over on the sonar map. According to the sonar display, these two black bars were estimated to be about 4 meters long. These two black bars were rushing in the direction of the fishing net at this time. What's this? A big fish? Looking at the reading displayed on the sonar, even AI Dahua was a little confused. At this time, the figure in front of him didn't seem to notice and plunged into Jiang Hai's fishing net. This huge impact even made the boat shake a little, and at this time, the reading of the fishing net increased a lot in an instant. Seeing this, AI Dahua immediately grabbed the walkie-talkie and was about to ask Philemon to set up the net. His sixth sense told him that he caught a big fish, but before he could say anything, Philemon had already set up the fishing net on the deck. Philemon had been paying attention to the pressure of the fishing net since the beginning. When the pressure of the fishing net suddenly rose from 220 to 270, he knew that it was either a big fish or a reef. No matter what, he needed to get the fishing net up immediately. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't have time to drink coffee. He immediately ran out of the cabin and came to the surface. AI Dahua also slowly stopped the boat and came to the deck. When the two arrived on the deck, Philemon had already controlled the crane to pull up the fishing net. The fishing net, which was bigger than the previous one, was slowly being lifted out of the sea. At this time, a huge sailfish was constantly struggling in the fishing net. Its sharp mouth had already stretched out of the fishing net. Looking at this big guy, Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously opened. This was the first time he saw a sailfish in his life, and it looked really fierce. Bang, bang. At this time, on the sea level beside the boat, a shark also jumped out of the sea. Jiang Hai looked back and knew that this shark was his pet, Big Idiot. He didn't expect that he just casually said that he was going to catch a fish, and it really caught a sailfish. Boss, we're rich this time. This fish alone can be sold for $100,000. Philemon, who was controlling the crane to slowly move towards the pool, couldn't help but shout loudly when he saw the fish. $100,000? Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but swallow. It seems that raising fish is really a profitable job. A fish can be sold for $100,000? He already felt that his breathing was a little rapid. Could it be that he had never thought about the problem of whether he could raise this fish? As for AI Dahua, when he looked at the fish, his eyes were also shining, but when he saw Jiang Hai's sand tiger shark, his eyes shone even brighter. He didn't expect Jiang Hai's pet to be so awesome. I have to go back to Chengdu in the next 2 days, so I'll post it on time. If there's a mistake, please leave me a message in the book review and comment section. I'll sort it out when I come back. Finally, I'll ask for your support and collection. Chapter 113. 1. Under Philemon's control, the large bag of fish was then placed into the pool next to it. However, as soon as it was put in, the huge sailfish moved vigorously, hoping to leave the pool. Unfortunately, it thought too much. AI Dahua was already prepared. He rushed over, picked up a huge blanket, and wrapped it around its body. Then Jiang Hai and Philemon also ran over, picked up the big fish that was almost 3 meters long, and walked into the reservoir next to it. The scientific name of this fish was Atlantic blue marlin, but although it was called a marlin, it was a sailfish. This fish could grow up to 5 meters and weigh 1,800 kilograms, which was more than 1 ton, nearly 2 tons. Of course, this fish was not so big. If this fish was so big, not to mention Jiang Hai's Big Idiot, Jiang Hai, and the others would not be able to lift it. Although the fish was struggling, Jiang Hai estimated it was about 600 kilograms when they lifted it. Although it was not particularly heavy, it was enough for the 3 men to use all their strength. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was there. Although he was not qualified to be a sailor, he was strong enough. He directly picked up the fish, came to the reservoir, and put the fish in. Watching the fish swimming in the water, Jiang Hai and the others were happy. If this fish died, it would be worthless. Such a big blue marlin, if it died, would only be worth 30,000. Philemon shouted 100,000 because it was alive. Marlin, sailfish, and tuna, these expensive fish, were basically not sold alive. Even in aquariums, There were few marlin or sailfish on display because these fish were too difficult to catch. The swimming speed of these fish was very fast. Fishing boats could not catch up, so fishing boats with trawlers would definitely not be able to catch them. As for the same fishing boats, the speed of the net was too slow. Even if they caught them, these fish could use their speed to drill out from the other end of the fishing net. Even if they could not, their impact could break most of the fishing net. If Philip hadn't set up the net immediately, the fish would have slipped away and even destroyed the net. In this way, Jiang Hai and the others would suffer a great loss. A new net would be broken after just one net. That would be extremely tragic. Therefore, 90% of the way to catch these three types of fish was to rely on fishing. However, there was a big problem after fishing it up. The fish was too big and struggled too hard. Although it was only one person, 3 to 5 men wouldn't be able to hold it down. If it wasn't for Jiang Hai, Ai Dahua, and Philip might have died. In addition, these fish needed to swim continuously in order to breathe. They would die soon after leaving the sea. So basically, when such fish were caught, they would be killed and made into ice. But Jiang Hai's fishing boat was different. His reservoir was filled with water from the outside. In other words, when the boat was sailing, the water in the reservoir would constantly change. This way, the fish wouldn't die. At least, it was enough to ensure that they were still alive when they were sold. We're rich this time. Boss, remember to give us a bonus. Looking at the blue marlin in the water, Philip's mouth would have curled into a smile if it weren't for his ears. He immediately said to Jiang Hai, "Of course, 10,000 per person. It's a good start. Not to mention the other fish. This blue marlin alone was worth 100,000. How could Jiang Hai be stingy with the money?" He waved his hand and said to the two people beside him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip and Edward Anderson smiled even more happily. Then, everyone returned to the deck, where there was still a lot of fish to deal with. As for Jiang Hai, he deliberately caught a sea bass about half a meter long and went below the deck. The biggest contributor to catching this big guy was Big Fool in the sea. Jiang Hai had to reward him no matter what, right? When Jiang Hai came over, Big Dumb was also very excited. Obviously, this time it was a blind cat that hit a mouse. Fortunately, this was within the range of Jiang Hai's fish farm, and Jiang Hai's fish farm accidentally bumped into it. Otherwise, with Blue Spear's speed, it was estimated that in less than 10 minutes, Big Dumb would not even be able to see the waves behind the opponent's butt. It should be known that this kind of fish was very expensive. Under such circumstances, there were naturally many people who wanted to catch it. However, under such circumstances, the World Conservation Organization did not list it as an endangered species and did not restrict its capture at all. This showed how difficult it was to catch this kind of fish. One had to admit that it was necessary to rely on others to catch this kind of fish. This is your reward. Come out and play. Walking in front of Big Fool, Jiang Hai deliberately took out his hand from his glove, then took out a small knife, cut a wound, and squeezed a drop of blood from it. In the past month, he did not have many opportunities to bleed, so his scales were a lot longer. Today's drop of blood was not very important to him. After dripping the blood into the mouth of the sea bass, he stuffed the fish into Big Fool's mouth. As soon as the fish entered Big Fool's mouth, Big Fool knew that it was a good fish. He did not even bite it and directly swallowed it. Then, after a splash in front of Jiang Hai, he went to the bottom of the sea. The energy in Jiang Hai's blood was too strong, so Big Fool needed to digest it well. After Big Fool left, Jiang Hai also returned to the deck. This time, he found that there were more things in the pool, which meant that there were more expensive things. When Jiang Hai went over to take a look, his eyes instantly lit up. Not to mention other things, just the dozens of large and small lobsters were enough to make Jiang Hai excited. F***CK. This is more than 10 kilograms. Walking into the pool, Jiang Hai grabbed a huge lobster. No, about 8 or 9 kilograms, but such a big lobster can be considered a shrimp king. It can be sold for at least $2,000 or $3,000. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip said with a smile, "Such a big lobster is indeed not small, but not particularly big. It is still within the acceptable range." Only $2,000 or $3,000. Hey, your lobsters here are too cheap. Forget it. Today's fish is good. Let's eat this guy tonight. Looking at the lobster waving its big pincers, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Eat? He. Only the boss is willing to eat? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dahua and Philip looked at each other, and then Ai Dahua said with some helplessness. They really don't know whether Jiang Hai is here to make money or to enjoy life. In fact, for Jiang Hai, he came here to make money and to enjoy life, which is very good. Then everyone began to divide and pack. Compared with the last time, there were more fish and less other things. This time, other things accounted for almost 70% of the fish. Jiang Hai's seabed still had a lot of things. Dozens of large and small lobsters. All the lobsters less than 2 kilograms, that is 1 kilogram, were thrown back to the bottom of the sea. In the United States, lobsters are also divided into different grades. Every half a pound is a grade. In the market, the smallest lobster was 1 pound and was called chicken. This was the smallest grade, but it couldn't be sold for much money. The bigger ones were called quarters, and the bigger ones were called sects. The biggest ones were more than 2 pounds and were called jumbo. Those without pincers were called cull. This kind of lobster was worthless. About 1/3 of these lobsters were less than 1 kilogram. Even if they were all picked up, there were still more than 50 lobsters to be sold. These lobsters alone are not a small income. In addition to the lobsters, this net also had a lot of shrimps and crabs. In the previous net, there were almost no shrimps, but in this net, there were almost 100 kilograms of Arctic sweet shrimps. Looking at this, Jiang Hai's mouth was watering. He liked to eat these shrimps the most. In addition to these shrimps, there were also a lot of crabs, including swimming crabs and walking crabs. These things also weighed more than 100 kilograms. If Jiang Hai kept these things, it would be enough for him to eat for a year. In addition to the lobsters, crabs, and shrimps, there were also a lot of shellfish. But basically, these shellfish were thrown back into the sea by Ai Dahua and Philip. These shellfish could be used to raise fish in the future, so they wouldn't go to waste. Most importantly, they didn't eat these things. If it wasn't for Jiang Hai's sharp eyes, they would have thrown back about 10 kilograms of shellfish. In addition to these shellfish, there were also some small octopus and small squid that were thrown back. These were all bait for raising fish in the future. In addition to the feed, there were also some broken stones, corals, and reefs. There were also a lot of fish, but the fish that was caught the most was the flounder. Perhaps not many people knew about the flounder, but when it came to flatfish, they would know about it. This kind of flatfish lived at the bottom of the sea. When a net was scraped, all kinds of flounders could be found everywhere, big and small. Just like before, the small ones were thrown away and the valuable ones were put away. One of them was more than a meter long. According to Philip, this kind of flounder was called the Atlantic flounder, which was the same kind of fish as the halibut of the Pacific Ocean. It's just that they lived in different places. This kind of fish could grow up to 5 meters, weigh more than 300 kilograms, and live for 50 years. This flounder was about 2 meters long, meaning that it had lived for more than 10 years. But if it was sold, it would be worth a lot of money. After sorting out this mess of fishes, even Jiang Hai's 4 big warehouses were almost full. After all, these fishes didn't need to be put in the cold storage. They were enough to be chilled. After 2 nets, the 3 warehouses were almost full. Ai Dahua turned the steering wheel, and the fishing boat headed towards the distant Boston area. This time they had a lot of good fishes. If they were to sell them in Winthrop, they might not be able to fetch a good price. They could only sell them in some big cities. After sailing for more than an hour, a vague fishing port appeared in front of Jiang Hai and the others. At this time, there were many boats going in and out of the fishing port. It could be seen that these people were fishermen. I haven't been here for a few days. Please forgive me. Chapter 114. Wow, there are so many people selling fish. Jiang Hai said in surprise as he looked at the crowd coming in and out. It's only January, it's still the coldest time, so there aren't many people selling fish here. If it was October, there would be several times more people here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip, who was standing next to Jiang Hai, also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod in surprise. Looking around, there were already thousands of people in the fish store. If there were several times more, wouldn't there be tens of thousands of people selling fish every day? It seems like the fish store is also very profitable. While Jiang Hai and Philip were chatting, the fishing boat slowly entered the fish store. Most of the fishing boats near the sea were more than 20 meters long, and those that were more than 30 meters long could go fishing. Of course, the real big boats were seine fishing boats. The big ones were 70, 80 meters, and even more than 100 meters long. But in terms of trawlers, Jiang Hai's fishing boat was already the biggest one. After arriving at the fish store, this giant naturally attracted a lot of people's attention. Hey, Turner, didn't you become a cowboy? Among the people who noticed the fishing boat, many of them were from Winthrop. They knew that Philip had the skills of a fisherman, but he insisted on becoming a cowboy. Who said that a cowboy can't fish? It's really strange. Hearing the words of the people below, Philip also shouted from the fishing boat. Hearing his voice, Jiang Hai also smiled. If he didn't force Philip to come here, he probably wouldn't be willing to be a fisherman. Okay, Philip, don't quarrel with these guys. Go to the fish store and tell the manager how many fish we have here, then I'll line up here. At this time, Edward Anderson, who was inside, heard Philemon's words. He stretched his head out and said to Philemon, "Nothing can be accomplished without rules. No matter how big the ship was, it was inevitable to follow the rules. First come, first served. This was a rule that everyone in the United States abided by. If someone randomly cut the queue, it might really cause a conflict. In the United States, other than ladies first, there was no one who had priority. When it comes to selling fish, even ladies do not have priority. According to these fishermen, even if the President of the United States comes, he will have to line up outside." Hearing A.I. Dehua's words, Philip nodded and went down to the first floor. When the boat approached the pier, he directly jumped off the boat and ran towards the fish shop in the distance. As for Jiang Hai, he sat on the plate armor and looked at the scenery outside. To be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't have the qualifications to be a rich man, because since he came to Boston, except for the time when he bought a boat, he didn't have the time to shop here. This was one of the oldest cities in the United States. Now, looking at the scenery on the boat, Jiang Hai felt a little refreshed. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't want to go shopping, it was that he didn't know how to go shopping, and there was no one to accompany him. There were only two young people in his manor, but whether it was Harriman or Belle Lester, they were both very busy. Every day, they were in a hurry. How could they have time to go shopping with Jiang Hai? Every morning, when they woke up, they had to feed the cows, clean up the cow dung, and check if the cows were injured or sick. When they finally had some free time, they had to patrol the fence of the manor to see if there were any broken ones. Whether there were people or wild animals sneaking in, they had to deal with them. Most importantly, cowboys didn't have a day off, so they were so busy every day. This made Jiang Hai a little speechless. At the same time, he didn't know why he would go out on the streets. It was boring to go out by himself without anyone to accompany him. He didn't even have a man, let alone a girl. Sometimes, when he wanted to buy clothes or food, he would go straight to Winthrop. There was everything there. If it didn't work, he could also shop online. The Amazon in the United States, eBay, and so on were not worse than the online shopping websites in China. Even the after-sale service was better. So even if he went to Boston to look at the scenery, he was too lazy to move. It's too boring. Looking at the boat slowly moving forward and the scenery on both sides of the river constantly moving backward, Jiang Hai whispered. However, although it was boring, he was too lazy to change Jiang Hai. He had to admit that sometimes, the more a person stayed, the more lazy they would be to move. This was especially true for young people like Jiang Hai. He was not willing to come into contact with the outside world. Coupled with the fact that he was not short of money and had his own small circle, he was getting lazier and lazier. Although there was no redeeming feature to this, he was still very happy. While Jiang Hai was looking at the scenery there, many people were looking at him. As the saying goes, you're looking at the scenery, and the people who are looking at the scenery are looking at you. Of course, looking at Jiang Hai was completely different from the original meaning of this sentence. Originally, this sentence referred to looking at beautiful women. Even if they weren't beautiful, they had to be handsome. However, Jiang Hai wasn't a beautiful woman, nor was he handsome. Strictly speaking, Jiang Hai was just a very curious manor lord. These people were looking at Jiang Hai, not at him, but at the money behind him. Although Boston was located on the East Coast, there were many Chinese people. It could be said that there was no one here who knew Jiang Hai. However, many of them knew Philip and Ai Dahua. Naturally, they had heard that the two of them had joined Green Forest. They had also heard that Green Forest had been bought by a young Chinese boss. So now, when they looked at Jiang Hai, they felt that Jiang Hai should be the boss. He doesn't seem to be anything special. He doesn't look like a rich person. Nowadays, Chinese people are rich. You don't understand. Maybe he is the son of a senior official or the child of a rich businessman. He looks a little short. His body and bones are okay, but he's a little too white. He doesn't look like a man who fights in the sea at all. Instead, he looks like a Xiaobai. Is this a billionaire? Looking at Jiang Hai, these fishermen whispered. Of course, their so-called whispers still passed into Jiang Hai's ears. For what they said, Jiang Hai could only twitch his mouth. He had long been used to being talked about like this. Thinking back, when he married his wife, his ex-wife, there were a lot of people talking about him. They said that he was a lucky bastard and that he was a freeloader. But in that kind of environment, he could only endure it. The words of those people were 100 times worse than what these fishermen were saying. Although these fishermen didn't say anything good, at least they said that he was white. Well, in Jiang Hai's ears, this was a good thing. While the crowd was talking, Jiang Hai's fishing boat slowly moved forward. It didn't take long before they arrived at the entrance of the fish store. Philip and the others had been waiting for a long time. They immediately jumped onto the fishing boat with a group of helpers and then went to the room where the fish were kept. When they walked in, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It really is the Atlantic blue spear. Kid, you're rich. One of the big men saw the Atlantic blue spear in the pond and punched Philip's chest. His face was full of excitement. Haha, it's not me who's rich. It's our boss who's rich. Well, don't talk too much. Hurry up and move these things down. Hearing this man's words, Philip laughed and said. Hearing his words, several people had already pulled the hook of a crane into the cabin and moved the pond out of the cabin. When the pond was moved into the fish store, the onlookers couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Wow, it's the Atlantic blue spear. It's a living Atlantic blue spear. Seeing the huge figure in the pond, the other fish of the same size instantly became a foil. Everyone's eyes were focused on the Atlantic blue spear. Wow, you're really lucky. You can even catch such a guy. At this time, an old man walked out from the fish shop. This old man looked to be in his 50s or 60s, but he was still very healthy. Looking at Edward Anderson, who had stopped the boat and jumped down, the old man walked over first, patted his shoulder, and said to him, "This is all thanks to our boss. He's a lucky guy." Philip and Ai Dahua knew that the reason they were able to catch the blue marlin was because of Jiang Hai's sand tiger shark. If it weren't for the shark, then it would have been impossible to catch the blue marlin. Now that he heard the old man's words, Ai Dahua naturally wouldn't take the credit. Lucky guy, this fish is great, very great. After all, it's a living Atlantic blue spear, so I'll give you $100,000 for this fish alone. Of course, the fish wouldn't be worth so much if it were sold by the caddy. After all, there was a limit to how expensive fish could be. Even the legendary bluefin tuna wasn't worth $100,000. But this blue spear was alive after all. If there were connections, this fish could be sold to some rich people as a pet or sent to an aquarium. Whether it was the government of the United States or those rich people, they would be happy to buy a living Atlantic blue spear for $100,000 or even $100,000. Of course, he had to have a way to get it. Otherwise, Jiang Hai could sell the fish. Deal, look at the other fish. We have a good harvest today. After shaking hands with the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a chuckle. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man said that there was no need to rush. Then he directly transferred $100,000 to Jiang Hai. After Jiang Hai confirmed the transfer, the old man hurriedly asked someone to send the fish away. After all, a dead Atlantic blue spear was worthless, and he didn't want to lose money. Chapter 115. The rest of the fish is 76,212. The shrimp is 4,561. The crab is 12340, and the lobster is 10829. Altogether, the total is 103,942. Do you want to transfer the money, or... After solving the problem of the blue gun, the old man immediately arranged for someone to send the blue gun away. Jiang Hai didn't ask where it would be sent, but listening to the old man's phone call, if there was no accident, it should be a Western restaurant in New York. It seems that someone is preparing to treat the blue gun as the treasure of their restaurant. After solving the problem of the blue gun, the other fish, shrimp, crab, and lobster were all put online and began to be weighed. However, during the weighing, Jiang Hai deliberately took out the largest lobster, a lot of Arctic sweet shrimps, and some crabs. These were all things that he wanted to eat. In addition to these things, this trip's harvest was also quite rich. Although Jiang Hai didn't have any other choice, he still had a lot of things to eat. Transfer 80,000 to my bank account and give me the rest in cash. Hearing this, Jiang Hai chuckled and said to the old man, if Jiang Hai wanted cash, the old man might have to raise some money, but Jiang Hai only wanted 20,000 in cash, and he had that. He immediately pulled all the fish and shrimps to the back and gave Jiang Hai $3,942. Jiang Hai put away the change and gave the remaining 20,000 to Ai, Dehua, and Philip, $1 for each person. Wow, thank you, boss. Looking at the brand new dollar bills in front of him that still smelled of ink, Philip's eyes immediately turned green. After all, it had been a long time since he had seen bundles of dollar bills. Most importantly, this money was a reward, more of a gift, and didn't need to be taxed. It was like money picked up on the street. Did you have to pay taxes after picking up money on the street? Don't joke around. Jiang Hai gave him the cash because he had considered this aspect. Thank you, boss. Although he was a little worried about the fish farm's harvest, Ai Dehua still accepted the money that Jiang Hai gave him. He looked happily at the dollar bills in front of him. This money was enough to cover his work for several months. Work hard. You won't be short of money in the future. Looking at the two's excited expressions, Jiang Hai also smiled and stuffed the rest of the change into his pocket. He didn't have the habit of carrying a wallet when he went out. His clothes had many pockets that were specially used to store money, keys, and so on. So when the money was stuffed in, it instantly bulged. Lucky lad. If you have any good goods in the future, send them to me. I won't treat you badly. Seeing that Jiang Hai was done, the old man behind him walked over and handed Jiang Hai a business card. The mayor of Winthrop had told Jiang Hai that, generally speaking, people in the United States did not give out business cards, but there were exceptions. For example, someone selling insurance, or like this old man, collecting fish. The front of this business card was printed with his phone number, and the back of the business card was printed with the price of various precious fish species. Of course, the price of fish would fluctuate every day, but the general price was about the same. Jiang Hai nodded with a smile and put the business card away. Then, he jumped onto his fishing boat, and the three of them left the fish farm. But although they left, the fishermen still saw the money they had just made. It was impossible to say that these fishermen's eyes weren't green with envy. Some of these fishermen didn't even make $200,000 a year. It could be said that fishermen with an annual income of $200,000 were very rare in the entire fishing industry in the United States. After deducting taxes, expenses, and a bunch of other miscellaneous money, these fishermen's annual income was probably only tens of thousands of dollars. When they were lucky, they could be considered middle class, but when they were unlucky, they couldn't even be considered middle class. Now that they saw the money Jiang Hai made, it would be strange if they weren't green with envy. After seeing Jiang Hai and the others leave, many of them looked at each other. Of course, they didn't want to kidnap Jiang Hai, but wanted to. Thanks to you guys today, we didn't have lunch at noon. Let's go back and eat lobster at night. What do you want to eat? It's my treat today. Because there was no need to go offline, Jiang Hai didn't sit on the deck. Instead, he sat in the living room. Philemon sat across from him. As for AI Dahua, he continued to sail the boat and look at the scenery outside. On the way back, Jiang Hai asked with a smile, "Wow, today is really my lucky day." Philemon exclaimed when he heard that Jiang Hai not only gave him a bonus, but also wanted to treat him to a meal. "If you like it so much, come and help me. You'll make a lot of money." Hearing Philemon's exclamation, Edward Anderson said with a smile, but after hearing his words, Philemon immediately shook his head. "Forget it, I don't want to float on the sea anymore. As long as the cattle in the manor are raised well, I don't believe that I'll make less money than on the boat." He was quite confident in Jiang Hai's cattle. Since the last time they killed a cow, they had eaten almost all of its meat, so they killed another one a few days ago. As a result, after this cow was killed, even Robbins was shocked and didn't know what to say. The slaughter rate reached 70% this time. After removing the bones, the head, and the offal, a total of 504 kilograms of meat was left. Nearly half of the meat was marbled, and the premium-grade beef accounted for 30% of the total. That's 75 kilograms of premium-grade beef, 166 pounds. According to the price of $350 per pound, this meat alone is worth $58,100. In addition to this meat, there are other types of meat which added up to the price of this meat. Jiang Hai and the others went all out to catch a blue spear for 100,000, and it had to be alive. A beef cow could also be sold for 100,000. How many blue guns are there in the sea? They can't be seen or touched. How many beef cows are there in Jiang Hai's manor? 20,000. Which one is the big one? He can't be wrong. However, since Jiang Hai has decided to develop the fishing industry, he naturally can't let the industry earn tens of millions or even millions a year. His goal is naturally to surpass 100 million, and the way to surpass 100 million is in his body. Okay, let Philip choose what to do. Have you thought about what to eat? Italian food or German food? Or what to eat? Interrupting the endless conversation between the two, Jiang Hai asked Edward in the driver's seat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip smiled and said, "I don't care about eating. I'm happier with $10,000 on me than you treating me to a meal. The most important thing right now is to recruit people." Hearing Jiang Hai, Philip smiled and said to Jiang Hai, "Recruiting." Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai asked a question in a strange way. "Yes, recruit people." Hearing Jiang Hai's puzzled words, AI Dahua also said seriously. Then he told Jiang Hai why they want to recruit people. In fact, the main reason is that money moves people's hearts. With the development of the ocean over the years, the ocean itself is naturally getting worse and worse. The coral reefs that could be seen everywhere in the past are now rare, and the originally rich marine fish have become less and less with the transition of fishing over the years. In recent years, the life of fishermen near Boston has also been going downhill because of the transition of development. Everyone knows that the green forest has never caught fish, so everyone only suspected that there might be more fish in the fishing grounds of the green forest. But after all, it is private territory and no one has confirmed it, so they're not willing to take the risk of being caught and find a fish there. But now it is different. Jiang Hai has already shown the fish there. Even if they can't catch blue marlin in one fishing trip, the $100,000 of fish is still very tempting to these people. Under such circumstances, some people may take the risk. If someone steals, it will be a loss for Jiang Hai. After all, every fish in that sea area belongs to Jiang Hai. If someone steals it, then the one who suffers the loss is Jiang Hai. This is the most unforgivable in a capitalist country. But if AI Dahua is the only one, he can patrol during the day. But what about at night? There will always be some mist time. Before he showed the reserves of the fish, he could be more casual, but now he can't. So in AI Dahua's view, the most important thing at the moment is to recruit people. Oh, that makes sense. Recalling the shining eyes of the fisherman when he left on the fishing boat, Jiang Hai nodded. It should be like this. After thinking about the problem of the fisherman, Jiang Hai thought about the problem of patrolling. Do you think we should buy a plane? Wouldn't it be faster to patrol like this? After hesitating, Jiang Hai said to AI Dahua in front of him, AI Dahua also nodded when he heard what Jiang Hai said. It's naturally best to have a plane, but it's a bit wasteful to use a plane for patrolling now. The price of aviation gas is not cheap, but when we raise fish in the future, we need to use a plane to feed them. I originally planned to tell you next month, but since you mentioned it now, I think we should also put this on the agenda. AI Dahua turned his head and slowly talked to Jiang Hai. According to AI Dahua, they need at least one plane, but it's best to have two. One can be used for farming, which can be used to spread bait and the like, and one can stay on the sea for a long time. It's better to drive away the fishing boats that enter Jiang Hai's territory. Hearing AI Dahua's words, Jiang Hai also expressed that he understood. As for the people who can fly the plane, they don't need to care too much. Anyway, they're going to recruit people. When the time comes, they will recruit people who can fly the plane. But the problem now is where to buy the plane. First update in the middle of the night. Please support Little Faye and collect more. Please, everyone. Chapter 116. We're here. Patting the car door, AI Dahua turned his head and said to Jiang Hai, who was sleeping in the back seat, "Oh, we're here." Hearing AI Dahua's words, Jiang Hai also rubbed his eyes, then sat up in a daze. Then he stretched and looked at the scenery outside the window. At this time, what caught his eyes was a big ship. It was about 100 meters long and 30 meters wide. Compared with ordinary ships, this thing is obviously not an ordinary fishing boat or cruise ship, but more like a warship. In fact, it's not just like a warship, it's a warship that has been decommissioned for a long time, and all the weapons have been dismantled. Obviously, this ship has been scrapped for a long time. It's just parked next to the port. There are many colorful lights on it. Under the illumination of the night, it flashed a different light. A sign hung in the middle of the ship, Sea Warrior. It seems that this is the name of this ship. It's really not small. After opening the door, Jiang Hai jumped out, looked at the big ship in front of him, and muttered to himself. On the other side, Edward Anderson also jumped out of the car. This morning, they went fishing and caught 2 nets to sell. When they finished selling, it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Originally, according to Jiang Hai, he was going to invite AI Dahua and Philip out to eat, but AI Dahua told him that today was not the time to go out and play. Jiang Hai's group first drove the ship back to Jiang Hai's port. Then the 3 of them moved the remaining fish back to the residential area. After all, they came out to fish once, so naturally, it was impossible to sell all of it. After all, Luo Binsi also needed to eat fish. Instead of buying it, it was better to eat the fish they caught themselves. So the fish they sold accounted for about 95% of it. There were more than 100 pounds of fish left, and each family could share a dozen pounds, which was enough to eat for a while. However, compared to the fish, shrimp, crabs, and most of the lobsters were Jiang Hai's special delicacies, but there was still a problem. He didn't know how to cook. After these fish got off the ship, if they were not dealt with immediately, they would die. So Jiang Hai had been busy cleaning up these fish since they moved them over. When all the work was done, it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sky was already dark. So after everyone had a seafood meal at home, AI Dahua brought Jiang Hai to recruit people. Originally, Jiang Hai wanted to let Luo Binsi and Philemon follow him, but where there were people, there was competition. Just like in Winthrop, no, it should be said that in the United States, there is always competition between land and sea. Cowboys look down on sailors, and sailors look down on cowboys. So in a sense, sailors would not go to cowboys' bars, and cowboys naturally would not go to sailors' territory. This could be seen from AI Dahua and Luo Binsi. They were all from the same town. If it were not because he knew AI Dahua when he recruited Philemon, and Philemon was not a pure cowboy, Jiang Hai might not be able to recruit this person. They usually did not even treat each other as friends. Even the manner they worked for Jiang Hai. Usually, Luo Binsi and the others would never look for AI Dahua and the others to play. Of course, when they gathered together, at least on the surface, it was still very harmonious. It was precisely because of this that now that Jiang Hai wanted to recruit sailors, Luo Binsi and the others were a little embarrassed. In the end, AI Dahua came forward and explained it. Jiang Hai understood that he was a little unreasonable just now. But after knowing it, he naturally would not force them to come over. So only he and AI Dahua came over. The owner of this bar is called Ariel. The owner of this sea warrior is called Al-Claude. You can call him Al. He participated in World War II and was a major in the Navy before he retired. This destroyer was the ship he commanded at that time. It once attacked Midway Island, but was later bombed at Pearl Harbor. Although it was later salvaged, it was seriously damaged. After World War II, he retired along with this ship. Later, he made a fortune in business. More than 10 years ago, when the government sold this ship, he bought it and transformed it into a bar. This is also the favorite entertainment place of all the sailors around here. After Jiang Hai got out of the car, AI also parked the car and jumped out. He walked in front of Jiang Hai and looked at the giant ship in front of him. He introduced it to Jiang Hai. Then let's go in and have a look. Hearing AI Dahua's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then the two walked to the big ship. Obviously, sailors were richer than cowboys. Even the Navy earned more than the Army. The customers here were richer and more willing to spend money. Naturally, the hardware here was better. Not only was the main body outside a battleship, but when you walked in, you would find that the decoration inside was also a different world. Although it could not be compared to those top hotels, Western restaurants, and bars. But it was at least a few streets away from Old Tony's cowboy song. The decoration inside was almost as good as Jiang Hai's residential area. It was understandable. If Old Tony's cowboy song was decorated like this, it was unknown whether Old Tony would go bankrupt or not. But at least the cowboys would not be willing to go there. They usually herded cows roughly and drank roughly. A place that was too stylish was not suitable for them. On the other hand, the sailors earned even more. Although they were all rough men, their American genes made them more willing to enjoy life when they were free. He was willing to spend more money. If the service they received was the same, it would be strange if they did not curse on the streets. Of course, in Winthrop, there were also some small bars for sailors like Cowboy Song. But the attraction there was not as big as this one. Here, just entering the door did not require identification. Ordinary children were not allowed to enter. If it was not for Jiang Hai following AI Dahua, he would not be able to enter. Walking into the bar, Jiang Hai found that it was really far from Cowboy Song, and it seemed that it was not just a bar. As soon as he walked into the hall, Jiang Hai saw a notice on the side, telling Jiang Hai about the entertainment facilities on the ship. This ship was divided into 3 floors. The lowest floor was a disco. It was very lively. Jiang Hai stood on the ground and felt that the ground was constantly shaking because of the music, but it was obvious that Jiang Hai did not like to go there. The first floor was a bar. It was divided into 2 parts. The left part was a more traditional bar. The decoration was similar to Cowboy Song, but it was more luxurious. The tables and chairs were better. There were many people playing billiards, playing darts, and so on. The right part was also a bar, but it was a music bar. Unlike the disco below, it played some country music or some sailor music. Although the style was similar, the atmosphere was completely different. As for the top floor, there were some private rooms. According to AI Dahua's introduction to Jiang Hai, there were some people looking for special services in these private rooms. There were also some people who were there to gamble for small amounts of money, and so on. Although Winthrop was not Las Vegas, it was impossible for all the people in the United States to go there if they wanted to play. Not to mention the money, it was not necessary to waste time. Today, AI Dahua took Jiang Hai to the music bar on the right. According to Jiang Dahua, most of the people who went to the left to play were young people, and in the eyes of this old man, young people were naturally not very reliable. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai felt a different style. As soon as he walked in, a special tune rushed into Jiang Hai's mind. Jiang Hai knew that this was some R&B, but he did not know the specific meaning. He was not a musician. Following the sound of the music, he saw a fat black woman who seemed to be about 200 pounds standing on the stage. She was wearing a shiny tight dress, and there was a band behind her. Her curly and fluffy long hair was tied behind her head with a hairpin. Her whole head looked like a large pineapple. Jiang Hai, who originally thought that this sound was quite good, lost interest in an instant. But below the stage, there were many tall guys who were listening with great interest. "Boss, wait here first. I'll see if those old guys are here." Regardless of whether Jiang Hai was interested in listening or not, in AI Dehua's view, they came here not to listen to music, but to recruit people. So he said something to Jiang Hai and walked into the crowd in the distance. As for Jiang Hai, he sat in front of the bar not far away and looked around. "Hello, what can I do for you?" At this moment, a blonde girl wearing a white shirt and a plaid skirt came over and asked Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai knew that this set of clothes was the standard clothes for the bartender here. No matter if it was a man or a woman, they had to wear it because it was said that the boss here, the military officer, was Scottish, so he usually wore it at home. Jiang Hai had reservations about men wearing skirts, but the girl was quite beautiful in it. The girl in front of him was a very beautiful girl. She was about 165 meters tall, with blonde hair, light blue eyes, and some small freckles on her white and tender skin. She looked really pure. "A glass of beer, thank you." Unfortunately, Jiang Hai was not a lecher. Naturally, he wouldn't say anything inexplicable. He just glanced at the price list on the bar and ordered a glass of beer. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl went to the side, got a beer glass, and placed it in front of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took the beer and drank it. It was a German dark beer. The taste was a bit bitter, but the aftertaste was good. Although it was not as good as the ale brewed by Old Thor, it was still drinkable. "You look very unfamiliar. Is this your first time here?" The bar here was different from the underground bar on the other side. Most of the people in the bar here were middle-aged men in their 40s. They were different from the young people on the other side. There was an old saying in Huaxia, "No doubts at 40." It meant that men would no longer be confused after 40, although there was no such saying in the United States. However, men in the United States at the age of 40 were basically married and had established a career. Moreover, those who could come here to drink were basically not lacking in money. Such people had strong self-control and were very stable. Now that Jiang Hai, a young man of 26 or 27 years old, had suddenly joined them, it really made the girl a little curious. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 117. "Ah, it's my first time here." Putting down the glass in his hand, Jiang Hai nodded to the girl with a smile. "Are you here to go to school?" "Which school?" Hearing Jiang Hai admit it, the girl also chuckled and asked. "Oh no, looking at my age, I don't look like someone who went to school. It's been a long time since I graduated. I bought a manor here and raise cows and fish." Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai explained, "Wow, I didn't expect you to be a capitalist." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl's eyes narrowed and she said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also knew that she was joking, but it was the first time he was told this by someone else. "Let's get to know each other. My name is Karma Cliff. I work here. I don't see many people of my age all year round." Looking at Jiang Hai's shy smile, the girl here took the initiative to reach out her hand, shook Jiang Hai's hand, and introduced herself. "My name is Jiang Hai. If you have time in the future, you are welcome to come to my manor to play." Shaking the other party's soft little hand, Jiang Hai also said with a chuckle. Hearing his words, the girl in front of him showed a hint of surprise. "Do you want to ask me out?" Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai was embarrassed again. Well, he really doesn't know how to get in touch with girls, and to be honest, Jiang Hai was just being polite. "Well, I'm just teasing you. Haha, it seems that you shouldn't come here often in the future. You should go to the left side to play. The pace here is too slow for you. It will make you stupid." Seeing Jiang Hai's wonderful expression, the girl here couldn't help but laugh. Hearing her hearty laughter, Jiang Hai also touched his nose and smiled a little awkwardly. "Hey, Karma, give me a glass of whiskey." At this moment, a female voice suddenly came from the door, and then in Jiang Hai's sight, a woman dressed in a fairly urban style came in from the outside. This woman looks about the same age as Jiang Hai. She's also a white woman, very good-looking, with long straight blonde hair, wearing a white woman's suit. She looks well-behaved, but she gives people a different kind of aura. The woman said as she walked forward. Then she sat in a position separated from Jiang Hai. She supported her head with one hand as if she had a headache. Karma, who was chatting with Jiang Hai, couldn't help but frown after hearing the woman's words. He turned and walked back to the bar, but he didn't pour whiskey, as the woman said. Instead, he poured a glass of milk and put it in front of the woman. When the woman looked up and saw the milk in front of her, she was stunned. "I say, sister, in your current state, you still want to drink? Don't joke around, drink this glass of milk quickly, and then go back to sleep." Knocking on the bar in front of her, the girl said with a look of displeasure, "It's not like I can't afford it, really." Hearing Karma's words, although the girl was a little upset, she didn't refute, but after whispering, she picked up the milk in front of her and drank it. Looking at the pair of sisters next to him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at them curiously. These two girls do look a little alike, but he has to admit that whether it is the elder sister or the younger sister, in Jiang Hai's aesthetic view, they are very beautiful women. "Huh, you are." Probably feeling Jiang Hai's gaze, the elder sister, who was originally smiling bitterly, couldn't help but turn her head and make eye contact with Jiang Hai. She said strangely. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was also a little embarrassed. It was really impolite to look at the other party so directly, so he smiled and nodded, then turned away. But unexpectedly, when this woman saw Jiang Hai, she stood up and walked directly to Jiang Hai and sat down. Then she kept looking at Jiang Hai. Feeling her gaze, this time Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. "Have we met before?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the elder sister asked strangely. I don't think so." After thinking about it, Jiang Hai didn't seem to have seen this woman, so he couldn't help but say weakly, "Hey, it's rare. My elder sister actually took the initiative to hit on a boy." "But elder sister, you are not being honest. This is the big capitalist that your younger sister took a fancy to, and there is a manor in his house." Hearing Jiang Hai's awkward words and the elder sister's gaze, Karma over there couldn't help but run over with a smile, teasing Jiang Hai and her elder sister with a smile on her face. "Manor? That's right. You really don't know me? My name is Sandy Clive, a teacher at Winthrowtown Elementary School. We have met in Boston." Hearing her sister's words, the girl here was more certain that she had met Jiang Hai, and immediately said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. It seems that there is such a thing. It should be the first time he went to Boston to play. As a result, in a ship museum, he met this girl with some children. Later, in the dessert shop outside, he met this teacher again. It seems that she has some misunderstandings or something. In the end, if Delia George didn't pass by and help him explain it clearly, maybe he would have to explain it to the police. "Oh, I remember it's you." Hearing Sandy's words, Jiang Hai immediately nodded and said, "Well, it's easy now that you remember. I remember you're also from Winthrowtown, and there's a manor. I don't know if I can visit it." Seeing that Jiang Hai remembered her, Shinny Clive also smiled, but then said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was confused. What's going on? A beautiful woman took the initiative to ask to go to his house. Is it because spring is coming and the peach blossoms are about to bloom? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai said that he was a little confused. His first thought was, does this woman named Shinny Clive know that he is rich, so she has some ideas about him? If that was really the case, then it was better for him not to agree. What, she got a bag? What'd he do then? But Jiang Hai can't refuse a beautiful woman like this. He just looked at this woman and was a little confused. Of course, little girl from the Clive family. But just as Jiang Hai was about to refuse, Edward Anderson's rough voice also came from behind. Jiang Hai looked back and found that behind him, there were several big men standing at this time. Compared with the cowboys found by Robbins, the people found by A.I. Dehua seemed to be bigger. When they saw Jiang Hai looking at them, these people nodded their heads with good intentions. Uncle Anderson. Hearing A.I. Dehua's words, Shinny Clive immediately spoke. Our boss's manor has always welcomed you, right, boss? Hearing the girl's words, A.I. Dehua also smiled softly, then deliberately touched Jiang Hai with the tip of his elbow, indicating that he should agree first. Although he was a little confused, Jiang Hai still knew that A.I. Dehua should not cheat him. So he first adjusted his mood, swallowed the words that he wanted to refuse, and then nodded to 20 Clive in front of him. "It's my honor." Hearing that, Jiang Hai also agreed. 20 Clive's face looked like she had completed a mission, and she was relieved in an instant. Then, she set a time with Jiang Hai. Since he has agreed to let her come, Jiang Hai doesn't care. Tomorrow, he may be a little busy, because if these fishermen pass the interview, he will come over tomorrow to sign the contract with them. But after the day after tomorrow, there is nothing to do. Hearing Jiang Hai say that the day after tomorrow, 20 Clive was also very anxious, so she directly set a time for the day after tomorrow. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the day after tomorrow, she will visit Jiang Hai's manor. When Jiang Hai was still a little confused, she had already finished ordering, then she drank the milk and left quickly. As for Karma Cliff next to her, she looked at her sister's appearance and was also a little worried. After apologizing to Jiang Hai, she went out to check on her sister's situation. After the little girl also left, only AI Dahua, Jiang Hai, and the few people that AI Dahua brought over were left in front of the bar. Taking advantage of this time, Jiang Hai also looked at the few people standing here. There were a total of 4 people standing in front of Jiang Hai. 4 of them were uncles, 2 were white, 1 was black, and the last one looked like a Latin American. The 4 of them were very strong. While Jiang Hai was looking at them, they were also looking at Jiang Hai. "Boss, let me introduce you. This is Tommy Charles, the best sailor in Winthrop apart from me." "Ha, I'm just kidding, but he is indeed a good sailor." When he was young, he worked at the Newfoundland fishery and held the record for catching the king of fish for 2 years. He once caught 16 bluefin tunas in George Shallow Bay in 2 months. He is quite famous there. This time, it was me who intercepted him. He was originally planning to work at the North Sea fishery in Europe. After Jiang Hai and everyone greeted each other with their eyes, AI Dahua also introduced them. The first person he introduced was a white man. This white man looked to be around 45 or 46 years old. He was younger than AI Dahua, but he was as big as him. He was 192 meters tall, and his body was particularly big. His skin was white with a hint of reddish-black. This was because he often went out to sea and was exposed to the sun. The hair on his head was shaved clean, but he had a brown beard. He looked funny and scary. Compared to AI Dahua, he was now in the peak state of being a fisherman. His physical fitness was above average, and his experience had reached the limit. He was in the best state of being a fisherman. After hearing AI Dahua's introduction, he immediately reached out his hand to Jiang Hai. He shook hands with Jiang Hai and said, "Nice to meet you." Jiang Hai also shook hands with him. After seeing the two get to know each other, AI Dahua continued to introduce him. Today's second update should be back on Monday. Let's stop here first. Please support Xiao Fei. Thank you. Chapter 118. This is Eleanor Moses, a legendary sailor in the Gulf of Mexico. He once went into the sea alone to catch a tiger shark. He was known as the Black Conqueror. After introducing Tommy Charles, Edward Anderson introduced the middle-aged black man next to him. This black man looks to be about 50 years old. Although there are no wrinkles on his face, most of the thin, curly hair on his scalp has turned white. Compared to the talkative Philip in Jiang Hai's manor, this man is much more serious. When he heard AI Dahua's introduction, he also stretched out his hand. "Don't listen to him. I was just unlucky. My spear pierced into the body of a tiger shark. As a result, that guy carried me for 50 nautical miles, but fortunately I won in the end." While shaking hands with Jiang Hai, Eleanor Moses said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. "In any case, this guy caught a tiger shark. This is Andrew Christian, our Captain Jack." Hearing Eleanor's words, AI Dahua didn't care. He smiled and patted the middle-aged Latino man next to him. "Hello, my name is Andrew Christian. Lima, you can call me Andrew." Hearing AI Dahua's words, the middle-aged Latino man smiled and said to Jiang Hai, "According to AI Dahua, this man is called Andrew Christian." Well, Jiang Hai was too lazy to say the rest of his name. Anyway, this man used to work in the Peruvian fishery in Peru a long time ago. He had quite good skills, and it was said that he also owned a boat. Later, it was said that he went to the Caribbean Sea to make a lot of money and immigrated to the United States. So many people call him the Lucky Captain Jack. Later, in 2000, because of poor investment, he went bankrupt. Then he went to California, the North Sea fishery, and the Newfoundland fishery. But since there was no fish in Newfoundland, he settled down in Boston by accident. His main income is catching tuna or lobsters every year. Latin Americans were also very hardworking. So although his income was unstable and he could not make much money, he was still able to survive. But this time, when he heard that Jiang Hai wanted to recruit a permanent member, he still came. And because AI Dehua's skills were very good, he also agreed to let him try. For this opportunity, he must seize it. AI Dehua. The last one is called Marlon Rupert. He was my colleague in California for 3 years. There is no problem with his skills. Most importantly, he can fly all the boats and planes. AI Dehua finally introduced a white uncle. But this uncle's height was the shortest among all the people here, only about 1.8 meters. Even Jiang Hai was a lot taller than him. At the same time, although his body was very strong, compared to the others, he was thinner. Originally, Jiang Hai was still wondering if this uncle joined because of his strong skills. Now, after listening to AI Dehua, he understood that this uncle knew how to fly a plane. As a fisherman, it was not a big deal to know how to sail a boat. To be honest, among the 6 crew members that Jiang Hai met, except for Philip, who did not know how to sail a boat, the others knew how to sail a boat. Tommy and Eleanor were good at it, and Andrew started his career as a captain. But when it came to flying a plane, it seemed that only Marlon Rupert knew how to do it. Jiang Hai had studied it when he came back today. His current stall was not small. It was time to buy an airplane. Of course, for the time being, he did not need to think about luxury airliners and the like. However, an agricultural plane and a helicopter were still very much needed. But there was a problem. Even if he had these things, no one would know how to fly them. Jiang Hai asked Bell that night. It was obvious that Bell, a Special Forces soldier, had not been taught how to fly an agricultural plane before, so he only had a license to fly a helicopter. He did not have an agricultural plane either. Now that he had recruited Marlon, he could use him as a driver. Hello. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai immediately shook hands with Marlon. After the few of them got to know each other, they went to find a round table and sat down. They began to talk about recruiting them to Jiang Hai's manor. To be honest, I pay Uncle AI Dehua a fixed salary of $1,200 per week, and if there are abundant fish at sea, there will naturally be rewards. Today, he just received a reward of $10,000, so I won't treat you badly. You just come to my manor, so I'll first talk about the issues of money and treatment. As for money, since you're new here, I'll temporarily set it at $1,000 per week. My manor has a small standalone villa for you to live in. You'll have to pay for the monthly water, electricity, and gas costs. I'll pay for the internet. I'll pay for the accommodation. I'll pay for the food, and I'll make sure there's enough beef and fish every day. As for vegetables, it depends on the season and the output of our manor itself. Jiang Hai slowly explained as he looked at the people in front of him. Business was business. Now that he wanted to hire these people and not just ask them to come over for help, he naturally had to make things clear. After hearing that Jiang Hai would give them a weekly salary of $1,000 per week, the eyes of 2 of the 4 people sitting there immediately lit up. They were instantly eager to give it a try. These 2 people were none other than Eleanor Cece and Andrew Christian. Although the United States did not allow racial discrimination on the surface, it was actually everywhere. It was always easier for white people to find jobs, while it was more difficult for other people of color to find jobs. Even if they did find jobs, their wages were lower than white people's. Eleanor Cece and Andrew Christian's situation was similar. These 2 people's standard was no worse than any white sailors, but they always received the least money, especially Andrew Christian. His life was more miserable, so to Tommy and Marlon, a weekly salary of $1,000 was not bad. It was enough to tempt them. They already couldn't wait to join Jiang Hai's manor. That's the main thing. If you're willing, you can go back tonight and prepare. I'll come back tomorrow morning. After signing the contract, You can move into my manor. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai explained the basic terms of the contract to them. Then he looked at the people in front of him and said, I'm very willing, and I have no problem with that. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, Andrew and Eleanor expressed their willingness to go. For them, a stable income of $52,000 a year was quite a wonderful thing. Most importantly, if they went fishing and caught something, they would be given a bonus. They didn't think too much about the bonus. $20,000 a year was enough. $70,000 a year was enough to wake them up laughing in their dreams. I don't have any other questions. Is there a fixed percentage of the bonus? After hesitating for a while, Tommy Charles thought about it and said to Jiang Hai. He was more concerned about this. Basically, it won't exceed 5% of each harvest. Of course, if there are unexpected gains, it'll be calculated separately. But as long as you don't lose money, I'll still give you the bonus. But there's no way to fix it. It mainly depends on my mood. Hearing Tommy Charles's words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He knew that the employment situation in the United States wasn't very optimistic. Basically, many people couldn't find a job in the United States. For example, this Tommy Charles. If it weren't for Jiang Hai's recruitment, he might have gone to Europe. So Jiang Hai didn't paint too big a picture for them. He just said very calmly, I'm in. Before Tommy Charles could make his stance clear, Marlon Rupert spoke up. Then I'll join too. Congratulations, boss. You've gained the loyalty of 4 good men. Seeing that Marlon Rupert had agreed, Tommy Charles couldn't say anything else. To be honest, he had only hesitated for a moment. The salary offered by the North Sea was €900 per week, which was equivalent to $988 per week. Most importantly, the prospect of leaving home aside, there was no clear indication of the bonus. At the same time, it was an ocean-going fishing boat. One would have to stay on the boat for a few months. For a few months, it was good enough to have instant noodles to eat, let alone beef. There was no way to eat beef. So in general, Jiang Hai's job was much better than in Europe. Originally, before Marin Rupert agreed, he wanted to see if he could add more. Now that Marin Rupert had agreed, what else could he say? Naturally, he agreed immediately. Jiang Hai naturally knew what he was thinking. He didn't need a few $100s. But he didn't like his subordinates hiding things from him. So when he saw that Tommy Charles understood so quickly, he chuckled. It was good that he understood. If he hesitated again, or said that he would tell Jiang Hai the next day, Jiang Hai might not want him anymore. At worst, he could recruit again. With the current employment situation in the United States, other things were hard to find, but there were plenty of people. Since everyone has agreed, I think you can go back and pack up. Those with families can also bring them to live in the manor. This is also a benefit. The meat and fish they eat will be provided by me for free. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, in front of the Winthrop law firm. Now that everything had been booked, Jiang Hai chatted with them for a while. At around 8 p.m., Jiang Hai left. Of course, before leaving, he also paid the bill. Now that he was a boss who didn't lack money, it didn't matter if his subordinates paid for their drinks. After Jiang Hai left, I naturally had to leave as well. After the two left the bar, Jiang Hai didn't go to sleep in the back seat this time. Instead, he sat in the front passenger seat because he had something to say to AI Dahua. Of course, it wasn't about the 4 new crew members. To be honest, Jiang Hai was very satisfied with the 4 people. What he didn't understand was why AI Dahua agreed to let Sandy come to his house. Today's update. I only came back last night. Looking at the book review section, it seems like I did not post the wrong chapter. Hee. Let me explain about the pond in the book review section. Xiao Fei also knew that tuna were the same as some sharks. They could not stop swimming. Once they stopped swimming, they would die. Therefore, they could not be placed in the reservoir. Generally speaking, when such fish were caught, they would be killed directly and sold as ice. Originally, Xiao Fei also thought the same. But a few days ago, Xiao Fei bought a book about marine fish. Because tuna were very precious, some non-ocean-going fishing boats were designed to open up the 2 sides of the ship. When the ship sailed, the ocean water would flow in from the front and out from the back. This way, there would be a flow of water in the tank of the ship. The fish stored in the tank would need to constantly swim in order to not be washed away by the current. This way, The fish that needed to swim could be raised for a short period of time. However, this time was very short, at most 1 or 2 hours. Moreover, the cost was very high. Because the ship needed to be split into two halves, the hardness of the hull would be affected. These were all problems that ocean-going fishing boats couldn't do. Xiao Fei didn't write these things in the chapter. If there was any doubt, Xiao Fei would explain it to everyone. Chapter 119. Boss, are you wondering why I directly agreed to let the little girl from the Clive family come to our manor? A.I. Dahua said to Jiang Hai as he got in the car, started the engine, and drove out. In fact, just now he saw that Jiang Hai was puzzled, but he didn't say it clearly. Now he can tell Jiang Hai. Why? Seeing that Edward Anderson was willing to talk, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at him. Speaking of which, although they have only been together for a few months, Jiang Hai still trusts the people in his manor. Especially for the two people, Robbins and A.I. Dahua, who he personally appointed to manage the other cowboys and fishermen. Jiang Hai came to the United States for the first time. If he didn't have a few confidants around him, it would be really difficult. These two old men are Jiang Hai's confidants. It is precisely because of this that Jiang Hai didn't ask directly just now. It seems that boss doesn't care much about the recent news. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson smiled and talked to Jiang Hai while driving. Don't you know that Boston was hit by a snow disaster this year? Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson said with a puzzled look. I know this. I heard that the businessmen in the city also made a fortune because of this. As for what A.I. Dahua said, Jiang Hai had also seen it in the news. Because Boston was located near the Atlantic Ocean, it was rainy in summer and snowy in winter. This year's winter was the same. The amount of snow in Boston broke the limit of previous years, causing a lot of impact on traffic and so on. From the beginning of the snow in November until now, Boston's snowstorm warning had not been lifted. But for Jiang Hai, a snow disaster is nothing. First, his house is very strong. Second, when it snows, they will always clean up, although the snow on the roadside has accumulated to almost 1.5 meters. However, for Jiang Hai's normal life, the snow disaster did not cause any problems for him. Oh, that's in the urban area of Boston. Winthrop is not so lucky. Several classrooms and gymnasiums in the town's elementary school were crushed by the snow this year. The mayor and the principal of the town's elementary school have been collecting donations for the town's elementary school in recent days, but the effect is not very good. School will start in 10 days, and they may be the most anxious now. Edward Anderson shrugged and said slowly after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Jiang Hai seemed to have heard about this news a few days ago, but he forgot about it in the blink of an eye. For a commoner like him, his previous life was to clean the snow in front of his own door and not ask about the frost on the roof of other people's roof. After coming to the United States, he was the same. As long as he was happy, he couldn't be bothered to care about other people and things as long as they cared about him. When it collapsed, it was about the middle of December. Fortunately, the school was already on holiday at that time, so only a few rooms collapsed and there were no casualties. However, for the people in the town, this was not good news. In fact, when it comes to donations, the people of the United States are more generous and active than the people of other countries. Of course, in addition to the problem of the people's hearts, it is also related to the policies of the United States. Donations can be deducted from taxes, and the amount of deduction is very high. Sometimes, $1 can be deducted from $1.15 in taxes. It is precisely because of this that many rich people in the United States have the reputation of being philanthropists. Because not only can this help them become famous and spread the awareness of kindness, but can also give them enough financial compensation. Logically speaking, there are many rich people in Boston, but these rich people don't need to care about the elementary school in Winthrop. In fact, there are not many rich people in Winthrop. Moreover, the current economic situation is not very good. Just by relying on these ordinary townspeople, $1 and $2 per person, they can only get a few $1,000s in total. They can't even build a classroom, let alone a gymnasium. From this, it can be seen that the people of the United States are conflicted. It is easy for Jiang Hai to say this. When he was in elementary school, the elementary school was very old. During the winter, there was no heating and the windows were broken. They used plastic sheets to cover the winter. It was not until he was in third grade that the school was renovated. After the school was renovated, they changed the heating and new glass. But even so, every winter, the students still need to use cloth strips and paste from home to cover the cracks of the windows. It was only when he was in junior high school that the windows were made of plastic steel. So, for Jiang Hai, it is nothing to suffer a little in school. But it seems that the people of the United States do not think this way. No matter how hard it is, they can't let the children suffer. This is their education policy. If they want to build something, they will build the best. In the United States, there is no such thing as making do. Then why did you ask her to come here now? Do you want me to donate? Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai nodded and asked strangely. He roughly understood what AI Dahua meant. He should want him to donate. Whether to donate or not, and how much to donate, it is actually up to you, boss. But if you don't even give them a chance to persuade you, it will cause a certain blow to your reputation in the town. To be honest, boss, your reputation in the town is not very good now. AI Dahua shrugged and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he laughed self-deprecatingly. It seems like this is the case. Other rich people, after arriving at a place, would benefit the village. However, Jiang Hai didn't seem to have such a practice. Usually, he stays in his manor and has no communication with the people in the town. The only communication he had was when he sent more than a dozen bastards in the town to prison and almost destroyed the police station. Although this matter cannot be blamed on Jiang Hai, it is still not enough to make the residents of the town like Jiang Hai. No matter where to invest, it is very important to have a good relationship with the locals. Even in China, some bosses who go to the countryside to build factories need to have a good relationship with the people in the village. Otherwise, it is not a good thing to come and make trouble every 2 or 3 days. What's more, Jiang Hai is still in the United States. Since Jiang Hai came, it seems that for the people of Winthrop, Jiang Hai has not done a good thing. As for the tax on the manor, it is the money collected by the government. It has nothing to do with them. In addition, Jiang Hai's way of doing things is indeed a little bad. This also makes it difficult for Robbins, AI Dahua, and the others to be sandwiched between Jiang Hai and the residents. But fortunately, although Jiang Hai has not done anything good, he has not done anything bad either. If the maximum favorability value is 100, then Jiang Hai's relationship with the town's residents is 49. It is basically still in a neutral state. There are only a few negative reactions. These negative reactions also came from the families of the bastards who were sent to prison by him. You mean, I should do something to change my impression among the town's residents? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Edward Anderson. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, AI Dahua shrugged. He was just giving an opinion. What to do is still up to Jiang Hai. Of course, if Jiang Hai wants to fight to the end, maybe they will still stand on Jiang Hai's side. But if they really wait until Jiang Hai and the town's residents are like fire and water, they may choose to side with their families and hometown. At least Jiang Hai is not very confident in his personal charm. Okay, let's wait and see. After thinking about it for a while, Jiang Hai realized that the cost of building a few classrooms wasn't a big deal. The cost of building a classroom was only about $10,000 in the US. A few classrooms and a basketball court wouldn't cost more than $100,000. However, Jiang Hai's current mindset was still the same as before. Let alone $100,000. Even if it is only $10, he is not willing to give it to others for no reason. He is also not comfortable. What is his is. Even if he doesn't want it or destroys it, it is still his. No one is allowed to take it away. But if the money is to build a good relationship with the town's residents, to leave a good impression on the government, and most importantly, to offset part of the taxes, then Jiang Hai seems to be willing to give it up. Jiang Hai, who has been thinking about this matter, returned home not long after. The next day, after walking Jiang Hai's dog and checking on his horse, he and AI Dahua but drove to town together. Today was the day to sign the contract with the fisherman, and Jiang Hai himself had already made up his mind last night. So today, he didn't come here in AI Dahua's car. Instead, he drove his F650 into town. "Hi, boss." In front of the town's lawyer's office, Jiang Hai saw a row of cars parked there. When Jiang Hai and AI Dahua's car drove over, the people in these cars jumped out. One or two people looked at Jiang Hai. Needless to say, these people are the fishermen that Jiang Hai saw yesterday. In addition to them, there are also their families. Jiang Hai said that their families can also live in the manor. This is a benefit. Fishermen spend a lot of time at sea all year round, but compared to cowboys, their income is really high. It is even not less than white-collar workers who work in companies. In this world, although money is not omnipotent, it is absolutely impossible to do without money. With money, they also have a relatively stable family. Unlike Robbins and the others, except for Philip, who used to be a sailor, who had a wife, the others were either single or divorced. These crew members brought their wives with them. Even if they had children, they would be too embarrassed to bring them along. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 120. Hey, you've been waiting for a long time. Getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the fisherman in front of him and said with a chuckle. Looking at the front of the parking lot, the tire marks on the snow have been blown away by the wind. It can be seen that they should have been here for a while. No, we just arrived. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Andrew Christian immediately shook his head and said, behind him, there was a woman who also looked like a Latin American. She may be younger than Andrew Christian. She should be his wife. In the chaotic South America, this was not a rare thing. Marrying him can get a resident status in the United States. If he didn't come to the United States early, even if he went back now, he would definitely be the hottest and most fragrant woman in the world. Women younger than her would be happy to throw themselves into his arms. Hello, since you're all here, let's go sign the contract. You can go back and pack up in a while. Although the villa and the manor has not been lived in for a while, the basic things are there. You only need to bring some personal belongings there. I will ask AI Dahua to take you to familiarize yourself with the manor first. Seeing that there was a woman behind each of them, Jiang Hai nodded to them and then said to the four people standing there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the few people here naturally didn't have anything to disagree with. They immediately nodded. Then, the few of them went upstairs together. The law firm in this small town actually had lawyers, but there were only a total of 3 people who actually had a lawyer's license. Moreover, they were all second-rate swordsmen who didn't have much ability and came here to waste their time. They may not even have memorized the Constitution of the United States. If anyone wants to sue them, they will really lose. This law firm had only 2 roles. First, when the court of the town began to hear cases, if there were no lawyers, they would go and make a guest appearance. Second, they would issue labor contracts for the employing units in the town. Labor contracts were basically the same. It said what Party A and Party B needed to do. The only thing that needed to be filled in was salary and some benefits. Jiang Hai had come here more than once to fill in the form. He was familiar with the process and quickly completed the procedures for the 4 people. Then the 4 people immediately drove back home to pack their things. As for AI Dahua, he went with them. Today, he deliberately drove the F750, not only for transportation, but also to help them carry some things. Compared with Robbins and the other bachelors, these guys who asked their families to take care of them always had a lot of luggage. The reference point was Philemon Turner, who had a lot of toys in his house. After these people left, Jiang Hai didn't return home. Instead, he drove to the town's primary school in the southeast of the town. Winthrop Town wasn't too big, but it wasn't too small either. Compared to Australia and Canada, the United States population of 300 million wasn't considered vast, but sparsely populated. Of course, compared to China, it was quite vast, but sparsely populated. Although it was located in the greater Boston area, it was basically in a peripheral state. The entire state of Massachusetts had a population of more than 6 million. The population concentrated in Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Quincy, Revere, and Chelsea had reached more than 3 million. Winthrop was a remote town that was only halfway to the airport. The permanent population was about 20,000 people, less than 30,000. In this small town, there was a university, 3 middle schools, and 3 primary schools. It could be seen that the density of schools was really good. Aside from a university, among the 3 middle schools and 3 primary schools, one of them was built by the town, which was the so-called national school. The other 2 were private. Compared to China, the public schools were better and the private schools were worse. It was the opposite in the United States. Private schools were better and public schools were worse. After all, the investment and corresponding groups of the 2 were not the same. In China, teachers were more willing to teach in public schools because it was a secure job. Even if the school couldn't make it, they could still go through the internal channels of the Education Bureau and continue teaching in other schools. Private teachers, on the other hand, had a similar income as public teachers. They had to worry about what would happen if the school failed. In the United States, it was the opposite. There was no secure job in the United States. Moreover, the income and social status of civil servants were not as high as in China. Therefore, not many people would enter the system. Moreover, the education system in the United States was divided into 2 parts. One part was universal. That meant that if one didn't have money, he could go to a public school. There were almost no fees. If one was from a well-off family and wanted to go to an elite school, they would have to go to a private school. The country didn't interfere with the fees charged by these schools because, to put it bluntly, it was a matter of willingness. Therefore, these private schools were profit-making institutions. The money invested could be recovered. Therefore, they were more willing to pay a higher price to hire teachers. In the United States, private schools had better facilities and better teachers. This was inevitable. The money earned here was more than twice as much as the national schools. These schools, which were not short of money, would naturally not care if they were hit by a snowstorm. If one building collapsed, it would not be a problem for them to build 2 more. This was because they could recover the money from the students' tuition fees. However, public schools could not do so. But even so, there would always be some people who wanted to devote themselves to education. Although Jiang Hai was not a noble person, it didn't mean that he wouldn't be moved by these people. Jiang Hai drove through the streets of Winthrop. It wasn't long before the new year, and the festive atmosphere was still very strong. This was the first time Jiang Hai drove through the town without a clear destination. Usually, he was lazy to shop. If he wanted to buy clothes or eat, he would just go there and leave. He really didn't take a good look at this town. Compared to some metropolises, Winthrop's modern elements were much lower. There were more bungalows than skyscrapers. In the whole town, there were only a dozen buildings with more than 5 floors. The snow on the roadside made this town look like a fairy tale. If it weren't for the fact that there were more white people with blonde hair and blue eyes walking on the roadside, Jiang Hai might have mistaken this place for a small town in China. Perhaps it was because it was still the holidays, so there were a lot of young people on the streets. It was much livelier than the last time Jiang Hai came to buy clothes. However, what made Jiang Hai the most unhappy was that the young men and women in the United States were too open. Each and every one of them was hugging and cuddling on the streets. What kind of nonsense was this? Every time he looked at them, it would cause 10,000 more damage to Jiang Hai, this golden bachelor dog. The cold air and the white world couldn't stop the love of the couples on the street at all. They snuggled up to each other, leaned in each other's arms, and rubbed their ears against each other to warm each other up. Some girls carefully held their boyfriend's arms. Some girls directly stuffed their hands into each other's pockets to keep warm. Some couples sat in front of the window of a convenience store with steaming coffee and snacks in their hands, looking at the quiet town outside, the romance and warmth in the town, as well as the smell of surging hormones, made Jiang Hai quite uncomfortable. F***CK. I hope all the lovers in the world are brothers and sisters. Finally, he looked at a square in the distance. A girl was squatting there, and a boy was hugging the girl from behind. The 2 of them had their faces close to each other, talking and flirting. Jiang Hai's heart was completely occupied by the shadow. His original idea of donating was extinguished in an instant. With the idea of being a positive person, Jiang Hai rolled up the window again, then stepped on the accelerator and rushed to the southeast of the town. This was why he hated going out shopping. I'm destined to be a lone star. Muttering softly, Jiang Hai drove and couldn't help but recall his 27 years of life. When he was young, his mind matured late. When he was in junior high and high school, he also had crushes, but he didn't dare to pursue others. At that time, he liked to play games more. When he went to university, it was supposed to be the season of love, but unfortunately, he didn't fall in love. Later, he worked and stayed at home, so he didn't have the chance to accept other girls. Although it wasn't that he hadn't touched a girl before, his first time was when he drank too much and sacrificed himself to the big sword. For the rest of the time, only Little Left and Little Right accompanied him. Later, he finally got married. His wife was so beautiful, but unfortunately, his wife didn't like him. In the end, after getting married, he still had to rely on Little Left and Little Right. Finally, he had money and became a rich man. His family property was hundreds of millions, but he still had to rely on Little Left and Little Right. AI, only you two are the most loyal to me. It will be New Year's soon. Should I buy a doll to reward myself? I heard that the quality of the dolls produced in Japan is not much different from a real person. Looking at the wind and snow outside, Jiang Hai muttered softly. He didn't know why, but as he spoke, he suddenly felt a little sad. When he didn't have money, he thought about having money. Now that he had money, the biggest problem was still not solved. Just as Jiang Hai was in a depressed mood, his car slowly drove to the gate of the town's elementary school. Looking from a distance, the situation of the town's elementary school was indeed not very optimistic at this time. There were originally a lot of houses, but 3 in the northwest corner had collapsed. Behind the houses, a small house that looked more like a warehouse than a gymnasium had also collapsed. It seems that it's really not very optimistic. Temporarily putting away his original sour thoughts, Jiang Hai looked at the school inside from the window and whispered softly. Today's update, 2 chapters in a row. Chapter 121. Hey, young man, what's the matter? Just as Jiang Hai was looking at the school in front of him in the car, suddenly the door of a small guard booth in the school opened. An old man wearing a thick cotton-padded coat came out and asked Jiang Hai with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai didn't dare to be arrogant. He directly opened the door and jumped down from inside. Oh, this is the case. I want to ask, is Teacher Shai Clive here? Walking to the gate of the school, Jiang Hai said to the old man opposite him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man looked at him with a puzzled look. Come in and wait, I'll ask. Anyway, it's the school holiday now. At present, except for the principal and the people who raise funds to build the school, he is the only one in the school. He is not afraid that Jiang Hai is a bad guy. So he opened the door for Jiang Hai and motioned him to come in and sit down. Jiang Hai thanked him and went into the small booth. As soon as he entered the small booth, Jiang Hai felt a warm air coming to his face. This small booth is warmer than Jiang Hai's car. Teacher Xanthi is on her way out. You wait for a while. After Jiang Hai entered the house, the old man also walked into the house, picked up the internal phone in the house, called the teacher in the school, and explained Jiang Hai's situation. After learning that Jiang Hai does know Teacher Xanthi, the old man came to tell him and then sat opposite him. Okay. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai also nodded with a smile, then continued to look at the school outside. Young man, are you from Winthrop? Maybe it's a little awkward to stay like this. The old man here took the initiative to ask. Well, I just came here last year. I have a green card here. I have a manor in the southwest of the town. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai said to the old man with a smile, Oh, you're the boss of Green Forest? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man's eyes couldn't help but light up as he asked curiously. Yes. Regarding this identity, Jiang Hai had no reason to refuse and directly nodded in agreement. Wow, you stirred up a lot of trouble a few months ago, but it's really hard to imagine that with your small arms and legs. How did you cause so many people to fall? Looking at Jiang Hai's figure, the old man here said with some doubts. Would you believe me if I said it was luck? In this regard, Jiang Hai really didn't understand why, so he could only smile awkwardly. Don't joke around. I don't believe in God. Kid, since you're so powerful, you should have practiced it before, right? Removing mud to control a server? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man said as he mimicked Bruce Lee touching his nose. You can say that. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai smiled even more awkwardly. Don't underestimate me. I was also a good fighter. If it was 40 years ago, you might not have been able to beat me. Seeing Jiang Hai's awkward smile, the old man seemed to be angry and boasted there. Listening to the old man's words, Jiang Hai smiled even more awkwardly, but since he was willing to talk, then Jiang Hai could only listen here. In fact, Jiang Hai's eyebrows had been twitching since he was 15 years old. Did this old man think that he hadn't read the history of Boston? As one of the first places to land on the American continent, in Massachusetts, except for the zoo, where are the wolves? At the age of 23, he also killed a polar bear and a penguin. These two animals should be in the Polar Museum. When have they been seen in nature? Even if Jiang Hai wasn't good at geography, he knew that penguins were from the South Pole. He even went to Las Vegas to gamble and earned $3 million. Well, Jiang Hai's heart was actually about to burst with joy, but he still pretended to be listening very seriously. When this old man bragged, it really made one's hair stand up in anger. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Jiang Hai was about to lose his patience, there was a knock on the window. Jiang Hai and the old man, who still wanted to continue, looked back and saw that Shinny Clive, whom Jiang Hai had just met yesterday, was leaning against the window outside the gazebo. I'm leaving. I'll come back to chat with you when I have time. Seeing that Shinny Clive was already here, Jiang Hai immediately wanted to leave. Although he still wanted to continue, the old man still wanted Jiang Hai to do serious business. So he patted Jiang Hai's shoulder and sent him out. As soon as he left the gazebo, Jiang Hai let out a long breath. Is Uncle Kyle telling you about his youth? Seeing Jiang Hai's expression, Shinny Clive outside the gazebo said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. The old man was too crazy when he was young. That's how he likes you. When he likes a young person, he will always tell him how brave he was when he was young. The more amazing he is, the more he likes you. To what extent did he tell you? While leading Jiang Hai into the school, Shinny Clive asked Jiang Hai curiously. I think he likes me very much, because he killed polar bears and penguins and also killed killer whales, and then he won 3 million yuan in gambling, but he paid the money to the people he injured. Hearing Shinny Clive, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. So he likes me very much. Oh, that's not bad, but it's not his favorite. Do you know what he said to my sister, Karma Cliff, whom you met last night? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shinny Clive shrugged and said, I don't know. Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Could it be more exaggerated? Earned 30 million and beat 30 people. He told Karma that after he killed the killer whale, he pulled the killer whale's tail with one hand and dragged it ashore and gave it to the refugees on the Caribbean side for free. Hearing Jiang Hai's inquiry, Shinny Clive said with a smile, Okay. At this time, Jiang Hai admitted defeat. 30 million. What is 30 people? Although Jiang Hai hasn't seen how big the killer whale is, it should be at least 8 or 9 meters, 8 or 9 tons. Dragging ashore? No matter if others can do it or not, Jiang Hai can't do it anyway, even if he reaches the limit of human beings. Maybe it will be possible after he rises a few more levels. It seems that the sky is no longer the limit of the old man. His limit is the universe. By the way, what are you doing here this time? Didn't we agree to go to your place tomorrow? As the two talked, they walked into the school in the distance. After walking through the gate, Shinny Clive couldn't help but rub her hands. Although she only went out for a short while, she still felt very cold. After stamping her feet a few times and shaking off the snow on her shoes, she asked Jiang Hai, Well, can I ask, what is your main purpose for going to my place tomorrow? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai decided to ask directly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shinny Clive's face flashed a trace of embarrassment. You also know that the classroom of the town's elementary school collapsed, so we need to raise some money to rebuild the elementary school, but the townspeople don't have much money. I mainly want to see the size of your manor tomorrow. If I'm sure you have some spare money, I hope you can donate some money." In this regard, Clive did not hide her purpose and said directly. When she said this, Jiang Hai was relieved, but at the same time, he also felt a little sour. Although after Ai Dahua finished speaking yesterday, he felt that the probability of this beauty wanting to hook up with him was not more than 1 in 1,000. But now that the other party had personally extinguished this 1 in 1,000 chance, Jiang Hai was still a little sour. Otaku, you love to fantasize the world's 3 great illusions. If you want to visit it, you're welcome to come back after spring. You won't see anything if you go now. You don't want to see my room, right? As for the donation you mentioned, Ai Dahua also told me yesterday. I think that as a citizen of this town, it is my duty to create a good learning environment for the children. So I came directly after signing the contract today. Looking at Clive, Jiang Hai shrugged and said to her with a smile, "Really? That's great. Thank you very much for your kindness. The place to donate is here. I'll take you there." Hearing that Jiang Hai was actually here to donate, Clive was instantly overjoyed and said to Jiang Hai with a face full of excitement. Then she took Jiang Hai to an office not far away. At this time, there were a dozen people standing or sitting in this office. These people were the school's leaders and teachers. Of course, not all of the teachers. Although it was not a private school, the number of teachers in this school was definitely not less than 30. Otherwise, the school would not exist. Now, these people were looking at the accounts on the table in front of them with a frown. So far, they had only raised a total of $12,000, which was only enough to build 1 classroom. The money for 2 more classrooms and the gymnasium was not yet settled. Thinking of this, these people began to have a headache again. These teachers were all paid by the government. Although it wasn't a small amount, it wasn't a lot either. Usually, other than living expenses, they basically didn't have much left. Nearly half of the money was pooled by them, but they couldn't afford to pay any more. "Everyone, this is Mr. Jiang Hai. He's here to donate." At this time, Jiang Hai and Clive walked in together. As soon as they came in, Sandy introduced Jiang Hai enthusiastically. Hearing her words, several people over there raised their heads and showed kind smiles. "Young man, thank you for your kindness. I thank you on behalf of everyone in this school. How much do you want to donate?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was here to donate, an old man sitting here stood up and asked Jiang Hai with a smile, "May I ask, how much money is left?" Jiang Hai shook hands with the old man and asked him, "So far, we have only raised the money to build 1 classroom. There are 2 more classrooms and the gymnasium. Preliminary calculations, we need at least $50,000. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a black female teacher sitting next to him said helplessly, "Then 60,000. Let's not say the least. No matter how hard it is, we can't let the children suffer. If we want to build it, we have to build it strong." Hearing the female teacher's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to the people in front of him with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, some of the lifeless runes instantly quieted down. Almost everyone looked at Jiang Hai in surprise. 60,000? They were a little confused. Today's second update. Xiao Fei will be on the shelves on Friday. Please support and collect more. Chapter 122. I'm really grateful to you, young man. Looking at the check for $60,000 in Jiang Hai's hand, the principal of the town's elementary school held Jiang Hai's hand tightly with trembling hands and said gratefully, "You're welcome." Jiang Hai really wanted to say that he was just trying to avoid paying taxes, but he really couldn't say that out loud. Before coming here this morning, Jiang Hai specially called his lawyer, Moses Adams. He asked about this matter. Although it was just a small donation of tens of thousands of dollars, Jiang Hai was a big client, so Moses Adams confirmed it as soon as he received Jiang Hai's call. The town's elementary school's donation collection was indeed within the scope of tax deductions, but it couldn't deduct too much. It could only deduct 80% of the tax. In other words, the donation of $60,000 could offset the tax of $48,000. Although it was still a waste of $12,000, at least it would leave a good reputation. Jiang Hai was such a person. Otherwise, he wouldn't do it. If he wanted to do it, he would do his best. So after hesitating for a while, he felt that what AI Dahua said made sense. He was now in the United States. With the upgrade of the scales on his body, he couldn't easily leave here. Under such circumstances, instead of being stingy and building a car behind closed doors, it was better to build a good relationship with the people here. He didn't expect them to help him, but at least they wouldn't drag him down. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai was here today. In fact, he wasn't willing to part with $60,000. No, we still have to thank you. We're going to name the new stadium after you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the principal didn't think so and still said excitedly. Upon hearing that he was going to name the stadium after himself, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, he felt a little embarrassed. He suddenly felt that $60,000 was a little too little. Someone else was going to name a stadium after him. If this happened in China, it wouldn't be so easy. However, Jiang Hai, who was unwilling to fork out more money, could only laugh dryly. On the other hand, the principal and the teachers beside him were obviously still in a state of excitement. After all, the money problem that troubled them the most had been solved. The rest of the matter was much simpler. As long as a construction team was hired, the reconstruction of the 3 rooms and the gymnasium would be done very quickly. After all, the houses here were all bungalows. In addition to the shoddy construction in the United States, there were not many houses. The foundation was laid very well, so the foundation didn't need to be moved. They only needed to remove the main body of the house and rebuild it. Although it was winter now, it wasn't a problem for the construction team. The townspeople were still very concerned about this town's primary school. After all, it was a public primary school. Some students whose family conditions were not too good still hoped to study here. Therefore, as long as they didn't spend money and had time, they would come here to help. Because of this, there were still many people in town. It was also because of this that they almost didn't include the cost of labor. Otherwise, a gymnasium and 3 rooms couldn't be built with only $60,000 to $70,000. This money was enough to buy materials, but it was far from enough to pay for labor. However, Jiang Hai had never done engineering before, so he didn't understand this. Now, he was a little embarrassed by these people's praises. Looking at Jiang Hai's embarrassed expression, SH-20 Clive, who was beside him, reacted first. As a teacher, although she couldn't say that she had seen countless people, she could clearly see that these praises didn't make Jiang Hai feel very comfortable. Instead, it made him feel a little uncomfortable. This also showed that Jiang Hai's personality was a little introverted. Perhaps he would be very open in front of familiar people, but at least now, he was a little embarrassed. The reason why Jiang Hai came to donate money could be said to be inseparable from her. Now that Jiang Hai felt uncomfortable, she felt that it was also her responsibility, so she thought for a moment and took the initiative to speak up. This time, I'm really grateful to you. We don't have anything to say to you. It's also noon now. How about I treat you to lunch? Hearing SH-20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. He originally planned to leave after donating the money, but he didn't expect that a beautiful woman would invite him to lunch now. What was going on? Hearing SH-20 Clive's words, the old principal also reacted and said immediately, Yes, look at me. I'm too busy talking. It's already noon. I guess Mr. Jiang is also hungry. Sandy, accompany Mr. Jiang to lunch. The money spent is on me. Forget it, principal. You don't have any money now. He was brought here by me, so naturally, I have to treat him. I don't know if Mr. Jiang will do me the honor. Hearing what the old principal said, SH-20 Clive immediately said to him, then turned her head and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly, although he didn't want to trouble others. But since the conversation had already reached this point, it was not appropriate for him to say anything. He could only nod to show that he agreed. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, SH-20 Clive also smiled, then took Jiang Hai out of the school again. In the United States, although almost every student after graduating from high school had a driver's license, because it also counted as credits. But not everyone had a car, especially some girls. Most boys liked cars, so when they graduated from high school, they would more or less beg their parents to buy them a car to show off. But girls were different. Sometimes they only learned to drive for credits. For example, SH-20 Clive didn't have a car. Fortunately, her home was not far from the school. It only took her 10 minutes to walk there every day, so it was convenient. But today, she wanted to treat Jiang-hai to a meal. There weren't any good restaurants near the school, so they had to take Jiang-hai's car to go to town. After the two of them greeted the guard, they got into Jiang-hai's car. From here, it could be seen that Jiang-hai was really dull. Usually, in this kind of situation, the man would be very gentlemanly and open the door for the woman, but Jiang-hai just got into the driver's seat. This made SH-20 Clive look at Jiang-hai with some confusion. This Jiang-hai is a bit interesting. Seeing that SH-20 Clive had already gotten into the car, Jiang-hai smiled and asked her, "Where are we going?" Hearing Jiang-hai's question, SH-20 Clive thought for a while and decided to take Jiang-hai to eat a good meal. "Let's go eat steak. I know a French restaurant in town that is quite good." Hearing that they were going to eat French food, Jiang-hai calculated in his mind. French food was known as the most gorgeous and also the most expensive food in the world. Jiang-hai had wanted to eat there before he became rich, but after he became rich, he really didn't eat it. This was because French food was famous for its foie gras and snails, but Jiang-hai didn't like to eat either. As for steak, the French preferred to use the outer rib to make steak. For Jiang-hai, the outer rib was a bit fat. Compared to outer rib, he preferred to eat tenderloin, meat, and upper rib, which were all relatively thin. As for the marbled pattern, the pattern was indeed fat, but this thing almost melted after being roasted. When it entered the mouth, other than the fresh taste of butter, it didn't have the taste of fat. Moreover, even if he wanted to eat steak, he wouldn't eat it at home. Was it so easy to eat special grade A beef outside? But now, since it was Sandy who said it, Jiang-hai couldn't refuse. After all, the two were not very familiar with each other, so he just followed the host's wishes. So after asking for the way, Jiang-hai drove to the Western restaurant. On the way, the two were obviously embarrassed because Jiang-hai was a taciturn person. He wouldn't take the initiative to find a topic to chat with a girl. Otherwise, he wouldn't be as lonely as he was now. SH-20 Clive, although an American girl, was a girl after all. Moreover, she and Jiang-hai weren't very familiar with each other. Today was only the third time they met, so there was nothing to talk about. For a while, the atmosphere in the car was very strange, but fortunately, Jiang-hai's driving skills were still very good after being optimized. The car was fast and stable. Before the atmosphere in the car dropped below the freezing point, he had already driven the car. After parking the car in front of the hotel, Jiang-hai and SH-20 Clive walked into the Western restaurant together. "Sir, madam, hello, do you want to eat? Do you have a reservation?" Although the Western restaurant in the town was certainly not comparable to the main city like Boston, the quality of the staff here was much better than the same type of restaurant. As soon as Jiang-hai and SH-20 Clive walked in, a waiter took the initiative to greet them and said to them with a smile, "We want to eat, but we don't have a reservation." Hearing the waiter's words, Sandy also took the initiative to say, in this season, no restaurant was full. So after hearing that Sandy and Jiang-hai didn't have a reservation, the waiter didn't say anything like sorry, but directly led the two to a table for two. After the two sat down, a handsome white guy also came over with a menu and asked the two what they wanted to eat. "Take a look first. Today is my treat, so you don't have to be polite, just order whatever you want to eat." She took the initiative to hand over the menu to Jiang-hai and said with a smile. Jiang-hai didn't stand on ceremony. He directly took the menu and looked at it. But when he looked at it, he was a little confused because he didn't know what was written on it. Western restaurants like this were divided into two sections. One was the single order section, which was much easier to say. You could order whatever you wanted to eat, and 90% of these were main dishes. The other section was the set meal, which mainly consisted of main dishes. It was divided into set A, set B, and set C. There was a lot of variety, and it was written in both English and French. Just looking at it made Jiang Hai's teeth hurt. It will be on the shelves tomorrow morning. The first chapter will be promoted, and the first chapter will be promoted. After all, it's in the middle of the month. Starting from a second day, there will be a minimum of 4 chapters a day. If the new subscriptions are read over 3,000 a day, 2 chapters will be updated over 4,000, and 3 chapters will be updated over 5,000. There is no limit. Please support Little Faye. Thank you. Chapter 123. I really don't understand. It's up to you. To be honest, this is my first time eating French food. I don't know what's so good about it. If he understood, he understood. If he didn't understand, he didn't understand. Jiang Hai's biggest advantage was his confidence. In front of women, if he didn't understand, then he wouldn't pretend. So after looking around, he smacked his teeth. He handed the menu back and said with a helpless expression. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH20 Clive was stunned for a moment, because in her opinion, a rich person like Jiang Hai should pursue quality of life. So she brought Jiang Hai to eat French food. But unexpectedly, Jiang Hai hasn't eaten French food before, which made Sandy a little dumbfounded. Well, I hope you will like what we order later. Give us 2 sets. After taking a look at the menu, SH20 Clive looked at it and said, Is it set A, set B, or set C? Hearing Sandy's words, the waiter asked, Set B. After looking at the menu, SH20 Clive thought for a moment and said, The so-called set A, B, and C are also particular here. Set A is commonly known as the traditional set, with a total of 13 dishes. The first is frozen appetizer, the second is soup, the third is hot appetizer, the fourth is fish, the fifth is main dish, the sixth is hot appetizer, the seventh is cold appetizer, the eighth is snow, the ninth is barbecue or salad, the 10th is vegetables, the 11th is dessert, the 12th is salty, and the 13th is dessert. Generally speaking, this is a very formal banquet. Only then will there be so many rules. Obviously, Jiang Hai didn't have the patience to wait for him to serve 13 dishes. It was precisely because of this that Xanthi ordered the B-set meal. The B-set meal consisted of 5 dishes, a frozen appetizer, a soup, a hot appetizer, a main dish, and a dessert. In addition, there was also the C-set meal, which consisted of an appetizer, a main dish, and a dessert. For the frozen appetizer, SH20 Clive chose tuna salad. Of course, it is estimated that each person can only get a few slices of tuna. For the soup, she chose cream of mushroom soup. After all, this is the most famous French dish. For the hot appetizer, she chose French stewed potatoes, and for the dessert, she wants strawberry crepe. But when it comes to the main dish, she hesitated. What do you recommend today? Sandy is not in a hurry. After hesitating for a long time, she still can't make a decision. So she raised her head and asked the waiter in front of her. Today's recommendation is red wine stewed beef. We just received the new Burgundy red wine from France this morning. You too can try it. Hearing the waiter's words, SH20 Clive nodded with satisfaction. That's it. You can serve it now. After she confirmed that she wants this, the waiter also bowed respectfully and went to tell the kitchen to serve the dishes. After he left, Jiang Hai looked at SH20 Clive. It seems like you come here often. Jiang Hai looked around and said to SH20 Clive, Well, I come here often because a long time ago, my father was a chef here. I often came here when I was young to play, but since my father stopped working here, I have come here about 4 or 5 times. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH20 Clive smiled and said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai can't help but nod. A French chef seems to be very powerful. What about you? You are rich. Haven't you eaten French food? It shouldn't be. After answering Jiang Hai's question, SH20 Clive asked Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's face was a little shy. Me? Don't laugh when I tell you. I used to be born in a poor family. Later, I got rich by chance and came to the United States to buy the Green Forest Manor. Deep in my bones, I still have the mindset of a small farmer. So, you can see that I almost never interact with the people in the town. I just stay at home. To tell you the truth, you might not believe it. Now, other than knowing what the mayor, the police chief, and a few salespeople in the supermarket in the town look like, I only know my subordinates. I don't know anyone in the town. I usually come to town to eat, and I often eat at the Italian restaurant on the west side of town. Their fried crab meat is very delicious. Looking at SH-20 Clive, Jiang Hai slowly said, "Wow, you're really different from the rich people I know." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive was a little surprised. Originally, she thought that Jiang Hai didn't interact with the people in town because he didn't like the people in town. He might have his own circle of friends, but now it seems that the shy boy in front of her is more like an otaku. "I didn't expect you to like the food in that Italian restaurant. I also like it. Have you tried the lobster spaghetti there?" Since they started talking, SH-20 Clive also casually talked to Jiang Hai. "Yes, the taste is not bad. The milky smell is very strong, but for me, it is a bit fishy. Other than that, everything else is fine." Hearing SH-20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai also immediately said, "How can lobsters not be fishy? Also, I heard that the Green Forest also has a fish farm. As the owner of a fish farm, you don't eat fishy lobsters?" Looking at Jiang Hai, SH-20 Clive said half-jokingly, "I eat it. That's why I said it was a bit fishy, not very fishy." Jiang Hai blinked and said innocently, "Okay, you're playing a language trap with a teacher? Do you really think this is good?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Sandy couldn't help but laugh. Looking at Sandy's appearance, Jiang Hai also chuckled and then continued, "To be honest, this should be the first time in 2 years that Jiang Hai said so much to a girl. Although Jiang Hai is a bit shy and introverted, he is a very cheerful person. But ever since his parents passed away, he more or less felt inferior when interacting with strangers. Therefore, his cheerful side would only face people he is familiar with, not strangers. He and Sandy should be considered strangers, but he had no choice. He hadn't chatted with people of his age for a long time. In the manor, there were only 2 people of his age. Halamon couldn't chat with him. Although Bale would chat with him sometimes, he had to work most of the time. The only people who could chat with him and have free time to chat with him were Philip's 2 sons. But they just came here to celebrate the festival. After Christmas and New Year, they would leave. Once they left, Jiang Hai would have nothing to do. After holding back for a few days today, when he heard Sandy arouse his desire to talk, he also began to talk nonstop. As for Sandy, she also liked to listen to Jiang Hai, because she thought Jiang Hai's words were very interesting and simple. He didn't sound like those rich playboys who bragged all day long. Although he was rich, his words were very close to life. This made Xanthi have a good impression of Jiang Hai. In addition, Jiang Hai had helped her school solve their money problem, so she was grateful to him. In addition to this good impression of him, further development could only be discussed in the future. But at least for now, she was very willing to chat with Jiang Hai. Teachers were actually very talkative, so the more they talked, the happier they were. Even after the dishes were served, the 2 of them were still eating and chatting. In fact, this was somewhat impolite in Western countries. It was just like the request of the elderly in China. They did not talk while eating and sleeping. However, the 2 of them were of the same age, so no one cared about this. As the 2 talked, SH-20 Clive realized that Jiang Hai was really an interesting man. Maybe it was because he didn't work outside after leaving school, but sometimes Jiang Hai seemed a bit naive. He didn't talk and do things like an adult, but more like a big boy. Listening to his complaints, listening to his jokes, and listening to him showing off the fish and beef in his manner, SH-20 Clive suddenly felt that this guy was really interesting. He wasn't as pretentious as she thought, nor was he crazy. Instead, he was a bit lively. Whether this kind of person was suitable to be a boyfriend was another matter, but it wouldn't be bad if he could be a friend. The beef here is cooked well, but the beef itself is far inferior to mine. When you have time, you can come to my place to play. Let's not talk about other things, but I have more than enough special grade A beef." At this time, Jiang Hai didn't notice any changes in SH-20 Clive. He only used his fork to stab at the burgundy red wine-stewed beef in front of him as he spoke to her with a smile. "Okay, then I want to try the taste of special grade A beef. I haven't had it in a while. Let me tell you, the last time I had special grade A beef my dad was still the head chef here. I snuck into the kitchen to eat it. It's been many years. At that time, I only ate a small piece, but I was fascinated by it. But since you said you have enough, then I'll go eat it tomorrow, Sage 20 Clive said with a smile when she saw Jiang Hai talking about the beef in his manor. Okay, no problem. You're welcome anytime. But my manor is now completely white, and there's nothing to play with. It's freezing to go out to sea by boat. After a while, when the cattle are released and we can go out to sea, then there'll be a lot of fun. Jiang Hai wasn't bragging. The special grade beef in his manor was indeed enough. In his view, SH-20 Clive was now his friend, so it wasn't a big deal to come over and eat beef. The only pity was that there was nothing to play with now. This doesn't matter, we can eat at night. All right, I heard you say that you haven't toured Boston yet. How about this? In order to thank you for treating me to beef tomorrow night, I'll be your guide tomorrow morning and take you around Boston. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Please support me. Chapter 124. Boss, you're back. With the roar of the car, Jiang Hai's F-650 also stopped in the parking lot in front of his villa. When Jiang Hai got out of the car, Tommy Charles and the others in the distance had already seen him and walked over with smiles on their faces. Seeing these people take the initiative to greet him, Jiang Hai immediately smiled. Well, I'm back. How are you guys? Have you settled down? Looking at the originally dark, small villas in the distance at this time, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to them, well, we've settled down. Boss, I have to admit that the hardware here is really good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tommy Charles couldn't help but speak first. To be honest, after coming here, he realized how wise his decision was. Although Jiang Hai didn't give him a lot of money, and there was no clear ratio of bonuses, he still didn't give Jiang Hai enough money. Everything was according to Jiang Hai's mood, but the hardware here was really good. Originally, these people thought that when Jiang Hai said that he would provide food and accommodation, they would live in the kind of workers' room. As for food, except for the fish, the so-called beef was enough to eat some usable grade beef that retailed at $3 a pound. Originally, in their hearts, they planned to do so. After all, they were here to make money, not to take a vacation. As long as Jiang Hai paid them on time, there would be no problem. However, when they followed AI Dahua to Jiang Hai's manor, they were dumbfounded. They were really living in the legendary small detached villas, not the ordinary workers' room. Everyone had their own privacy. In the small villa, there was everything. Although it was not big, it was not a problem for a family to live in. As for the living conditions when they first arrived, they were already confused. Satisfied, very satisfied, very satisfied. If such a small villa was rented outside, the annual rent would be a few $1,000s. In Jiang Hai's place, however, they could live here for free, which was equivalent to giving them an extra $100 a week. What was there to be dissatisfied about? After putting everything away, they followed AI Dahua to the warehouse to get what they wanted to eat. As soon as they arrived at the warehouse, they realized that Jiang Hai was really too generous. The imagined small amount of usable beef did not exist at all. In Jiang Hai's place, the superior and specially selected beef was kept by Luo Binsi. Naturally, this level of beef was prepared for Jiang Hai. Other than the special grade and the special grade, Robbins and the others could eat them. In other words, the meat they ate was all the best and standard. Not to mention usable meat, even commercial-grade beef was fed to the dogs. Jiang Hai had so many cattle dogs at home, and there were 2 big dogs. Jiang Hai picked up Xiao Bai's Sea Eagle. These guys naturally ate beef, except for Xiao Bai and Jiang Hai, who ate the superior and specially selected grade beef. The other dogs ate commercial-grade beef. As for Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai, they mainly ate standard beef. Of course, sometimes they would eat some good beef that Jiang Hai rewarded them. This beef was usually not eaten in some American families, but in Jiang Hai's manor, it was fed to the dogs. One had to admit that sometimes Jiang Hai was really a spendthrift. But for these fishermen, when they received the food, they were even more shocked. Inside Jiang Hai's manor, there was no ration of food. Instead, they could eat whatever they wanted. If you want to eat fish, then take fish. If you want to eat beef, then take beef. If you want to eat whatever you want, then take whatever you want, as long as you don't waste it. And most importantly, you can't sell it outside. Aside from that, Zhanghai didn't have any requirements for them. So when these fishermen came home with more than 10 pounds of beef, their wives couldn't help but feel numb. In the past, they could only eat the beef during the New Year's festivals. Unexpectedly, it was taken back by their own men. It seemed that living in this manner was the best choice. It was precisely because of this that these fishermen were a little confused. As the saying goes, one's hand blinds one's eye. After everything was settled, a few new fishermen gathered together. They also gathered together to express their attitude. They must work hard for Zhanghai. Otherwise, they would really be kicked out by Zhanghai. They would not be able to find such benefits anywhere else. It's fine as long as you're satisfied. Work hard for me, and I won't treat you badly. Have a good rest of the day, and discuss with AI tomorrow about how to be on duty. You may have heard that when I went to sell fish a few days ago, I might have been targeted by others. If there are boats coming to my territory to steal fish, you'll have to put in some effort. Seeing that the fishermen were very satisfied, Zhanghai also smiled. Then, he patted the arm of Eleanor Cece, who was silent beside him, and said to them earnestly, "Don't worry if those bastards dare to come. I will let them have a taste of my old buddy's power." Hearing Zhanghai's words, Tommy Charles also said immediately. Zhanghai knew that the old buddy they were talking about was the gun. These fishermen had the habit of carrying guns when they went out to sea. After all, the sea was different from land. If something happened, it would be troublesome. Then I will have to trouble you. Go back and rest quickly. Hearing their words and feeling their spirit, Zhanghai also nodded with satisfaction. Recruiting people, other things were not too important. The most important thing was to have a state where they were willing to work hard for his career. At least, Zhanghai was very satisfied with the current state of these people. Well, okay. Hearing Zhanghai's words, everyone here nodded happily to Zhanghai and then walked back to their rooms. As for Zhanghai, he walked back to his villa. However, after returning, he did not go directly to the house. Instead, he went to the warehouse first. He remembered that he invited Shinny Clive to come over to eat beef tomorrow. He did not want to run out of beef by then. Fortunately, there is still beef. Walking into the warehouse's freezer, Zhanghai saw a few large pieces of beef hanging in the air. These beef were left behind by robins and the others after they killed the cows. As far as the current situation was concerned, it was still in a very fresh state. Very good. Besides beef, is there anything else? This was the first time Zhanghai invited a girl to his house for dinner. Even if his reaction was half a beat slower, he was still a little slow. He did not particularly understand what this meant. In fact, he did not think about it that way. The reason why he was here to see what else was in the house was entirely because of the genes of an otaku. If he wanted to treat someone to a meal, he would not treat them. If he wanted to treat someone to a meal, naturally, he would eat well, especially when the other party was a beauty. After checking the beef and confirming that it was superior grade, Zhanghai looked at other things. But after looking at it, Zhanghai couldn't help but frown. This was because the ingredients in his warehouse, in addition to the special grade beef, there were only some prawns and crabs left. After the lobsters were caught yesterday, they were eliminated by him and the people in the manor. The remaining prawns and crabs, to be honest, the people in the United States almost didn't eat crabs. They only ate the legs of crabs. They didn't have much interest in the hard-to-get meat, especially the fishermen. They didn't like prawns and crabs, which were more troublesome to eat. Therefore, the only person who liked to eat them here was Zhanghai. But on the contrary, compared to prawns and crabs, lobsters are something they like to eat very much. These guys will also pick delicious things to eat. I'm the owner of a fishery. I treat a girl to a meal, but I don't even have lobsters. It's really embarrassing. Scratching his head, Zhanghai muttered in a low voice. After thinking for a while, he felt that he should go to the sea tonight to catch a few. After learning that the sharks under the sea were not a threat, Zhanghai's courage increased a lot. But thinking about it, the sky is dark outside, and the water is cold. If I go into the water to catch lobsters, Ugh, I'm crazy. In fact, the best way was to let AI Dahua and the others bring back some lobsters when they patrol tomorrow. However, Chinese people, especially Chinese otakus, had a common problem. They didn't like to ask others to help them. There was no need to ask others to help them do things that they could do. In his opinion, he could do the lobsters himself, so he was a little uncomfortable to ask AI Dahua for help. However, considering that it was cold and late at night, he still felt that he should trouble AI Dahua. After returning to his room, Jiang Hai called AI Dahua with the mentality of being rejected. However, when AI Dahua heard that Jiang Hai wanted to treat a girl to a meal at home tomorrow, he naturally patted his chest and said that there was no problem. Not to mention lobsters, even if it was something else, he would find a way to get it. Moreover, although lobsters were rare on the nearby coast, after all, Jiang Hai's underwater water resources were extremely abundant. There was no shortage of lobsters. He only needed to make the fishing net deeper. Even if he couldn't catch lobsters that were too big, it wouldn't be a problem for him to catch about 5 kilograms of lobsters. 5 kilograms of lobsters would be good enough for him to treat others to a meal. Hearing AI Dahua's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he agreed. If he had some hesitation, then Jiang Hai would have to find a way to get it himself. It seems that Jiang Hai's position is still not right. He is the boss, not a worker. Sometimes the mindset of a commoner is really the biggest obstacle to becoming a capitalist. With the idea of go to Boston tomorrow to play. Well, of course, he also had the idea of going out with Sandy. Jiang Hai quickly fell asleep on his big bed, but maybe because he was excited, he woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, he saw that it was still early, so he went to exercise. When he came back, he received a text message from Shinny Clive, asking if he had woken up. When Jiang Hai saw the text message, he quickly replied on his phone. This was the first time he texted a girl in a long time. The last time he texted a girl was to inform his wife that he was leaving. But in his heart, this kind of text message obviously didn't count. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.